The wilderness didn't judge. That's what Ethan Rourke loved most about the high country. The way the pines stood silent as sentinels, the way the morning mist rolled through the valleys without memory or accusation. Out here, 30 miles from the nearest settlement, a man could almost forget what his hands had done. Almost. He stood at the edge of the clearing where he'd built his cabin, axe in hand, watching the sun burn through the fog. The woodpile was already substantial, enough to see him and Sarah through 2 winters if need be, but he kept splitting logs anyway, finding rhythm in the repetitive violence of blade against wood. It was honest violence, the kind that built instead of destroyed. "You'll have us buried in firewood before autumn even arrives," Sarah called from the cabin porch, her voice carrying that mixture of affection and exasperation he'd come to know so well. Ethan turned, allowing himself a rare smile. She stood framed in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, her dark hair still loose around her shoulders. 3 years they'd been together now, 3 years since she'd found him half dead from a bullet wound and nursed him back to life. Though she'd done more than heal his body. She'd given him something he thought he'd lost forever, a reason to wake up that didn't involve a gun. "Can't be too prepared," he said, setting down the axe. "Winter up here doesn't forgive mistakes." "Neither does stubbornness." She held out the second cup she'd been hiding behind her back. "Come drink your coffee before it gets cold. The wood will still be there in 10 minutes. He crossed the clearing, boots crunching on pine needles. The coffee was strong and bitter, the way he liked it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching a hawk circle high above the tree line. "You're thinking about town again," Sarah said quietly. Ethan tensed. "What makes you say that?" "Because you always chop wood like you're trying to kill it when you're thinking about town." She looked at him with those steady green eyes that seemed to see straight through his defenses. "We're low on supplies, Ethan. We need salt, flour, coffee, the necessities. Another week, maybe 2, at most." He knew she was right. They'd stretched their stores as long as possible, but the wilderness, for all its mercy, didn't provide everything. Eventually, every hermit had to face civilization. "Redstone Gulch is the closest," he said, the words tasting like ash. "I know." "Could try Henderson Creek. It's farther, but—" "Ethan." Her hand found his arm. "You can't run from every town with a sheriff's office. It's been 5 years since Montana. Nobody's looking for you anymore." "Maybe not looking, but remembering." He stared into his coffee. "Some things people don't forget. Then they'll have to learn that Ethan Rourke isn't who he used to be." But that was the question that gnawed at him in the dark hours before dawn, wasn't it? How much could a man really change? He'd hung up his guns, sworn off the violence that had defined the first half of his life. But oaths were easy to make in the quiet of the wilderness. Towns were different. Towns had people, and where there were people, there was always someone willing to test a man's resolve. Still, Sarah was right. They needed supplies. 3 days, he said finally. "We ride down in 3 days, get what we need, and ride back. Quick and quiet." She squeezed his arm. "Quick and quiet. I can work with that." But the 3 days passed too quickly. Ethan spent them in preparation, checking the horses, going over their list of supplies, trying to ignore the growing unease in his gut. He told himself it was just old habits, the caution of a man who'd lived too long with a price on his head. But some part of him knew better. Some part of him could feel the current of fate starting to pull, dragging him back toward the world he'd tried so hard to leave behind. They set out before dawn on the 3rd day, riding down through the high passes as the sun turned the sky from black to purple to gold. The journey would take most of the day. The wilderness didn't yield easily to travelers, but Ethan found himself in no hurry. Every mile closer to Redstone Gulch felt like a mile closer to something he couldn't name but definitely didn't want to meet. Sarah rode beside him, her mare keeping easy pace with his gelding. She tied her hair back and wore her riding clothes, practical leather and denim that marked her as a woman of the frontier, not the saloons. She'd grown up in these mountains, knew them better than most men. That wilderness wisdom was part of what had drawn him to her. "Tell me again about this town," she said as they navigated a steep switchback trail. "Not much to tell. Redstone Gulch sprung up 5 years back when they found silver in the hills. Used to be just a mining camp, but last I heard it had grown into something resembling a real settlement. Hotel, general store, saloon, the usual." "And the law?" Ethan shrugged. Had a sheriff last time I passed through. Man named Dalton, I think. Seemed competent enough. Kept his head down. Didn't ask too many questions of strangers. That was 2 years ago, Ethan. Things change. Towns like that don't change much. Just get meaner or deader. Sometimes both. They rode in silence for a while, the trail widening as they descended into the lower elevations. The air grew warmer, the pines giving way to scrub oak and sage. By midday they could see the valley spreading out below them, and there in the distance, the ugly sprawl of Redstone Gulch, its buildings like a wound in the landscape. They stopped to water the horses at a creek about 5 miles out. Ethan knelt beside the stream, splashing cold water on his face, trying to wash away the tension that had been building all morning. That's when he heard the scream. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. 20 years of instinct compressed into a single moment of pure reaction. He was on his feet, eyes scanning the tree line, hand reaching automatically for a gun that wasn't there. Another scream, closer now. A woman's voice, high with terror. "Ethan!" Sarah started, but he was already running, crashing through the brush toward the sound. He burst into a small clearing and saw them, 2 men on horseback, circling a woman who'd been thrown from her mount. Her dress was torn, her face bleeding from where she'd hit the ground. One of the men was laughing, a sound like broken glass scraped across stone. "Please," the woman sobbed, "just let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear." "Oh, you won't tell anyone?" the laughing man said. He was young, maybe 25, with a cruel mouth and eyes that held no light. "That's the first true thing you've said, darling." His companion, older and scarred, had already dismounted. He moved toward the woman with the casual inevitability of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. Ethan stepped into the clearing. "That's far enough," he said, his voice carrying that old authority he'd thought he'd buried. Both men turned. The younger one's hand dropped to his gun. "Well, well," he said, that shattered glass laugh returning. "Got us a hero. You looking to die today, friend?" "Looking to avoid it, actually," Ethan replied, keeping his voice level. "Same as you should be." The scarred man spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You're unarmed, stranger. Might want to reconsider your play here." "No play. Just asking you to leave the lady alone and ride on." "Asking." The younger man's hand rested on his pistol grip now. "That's real polite. But see, we found her first. Finders keepers, as they say." The woman had managed to crawl back against a tree, her eyes wide with hope and fear. Behind Ethan, he could hear Sarah approaching through the brush, but he didn't turn. Couldn't afford to take his eyes off these two. "I'm going to give you a choice," Ethan said quietly. "You can ride away right now, forget this ever happened. Or you can draw that gun, and we'll see how the next 60 seconds work out for you." The younger man's eyes narrowed. Big talk from an unarmed man. "Who said I was unarmed?" It was a bluff. His rifle was still on his horse, his pistol left behind in the cabin months ago. But he said it with such absolute conviction that both men hesitated. In that world, at that time, no sane man walked around truly defenseless. The younger outlaw's confidence flickered. "Ty," the scarred man said, a warning in his voice. "Maybe we should—" "Shut up, Ben." Ty's hand tightened on his gun. "I'm not backing down from some wilderness hermit playing tough." The moment stretched like hot glass, ready to shatter. Ethan could feel his old self rising up, the gunfighter who'd read men's intentions in the twitch of an eye, who'd survived 24 shootouts by being faster, colder, more willing to kill than anyone else. That man knew exactly what was about to happen. Ty was going to draw. He was young and proud and stupid, and he was going to draw, and Ethan would have to— "Gentlemen." Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stepped into the clearing, and both outlaws' attention snapped to her. She held Ethan's rifle, not quite pointed at them, but not quite pointed away either. "My husband was being polite," she said calmly. "I'm not as patient. You have about 3 seconds to mount up and ride, or I start shooting, and unlike him, I'm not interested in conversation." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ben grabbed Ty's arm. "Come on," he muttered. "Not worth it." "Like hell." "Look at her eyes, you idiot. She'll do it, and that rifle's already cocked." Ty looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and whatever he saw there made him take a step back. His hand came away from his gun. "This ain't over," he said, trying to salvage some dignity. "We'll remember you." "I'm counting on forgetting you," Ethan replied. "Now ride." They mounted up, Ben moving quickly, Ty with deliberate slowness, trying to make it look like his choice. As they spurred their horses toward the road, Ty turned back one last time. "See you in Redstone Gulch, hero. Real soon." Then they were gone, hoofbeats fading into the afternoon heat. Ethan went to the woman, helping her to her feet. She was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. I don't think so. Bruises mostly." Tears cut tracks through the dust on her face. "Thank you. If you hadn't come when you did..." "It's all right now. Can you ride?" She nodded, then seemed to really see him for the first time. "You're Ethan Rourke." His blood went cold. "I don't... No, it's all right. I'm not... I heard the stories, but..." She took a shaky breath. "My name is Margaret Dalton. My husband is the sheriff in Redstone Gulch. Was the sheriff." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "They killed him 3 days ago, shot him in the back outside the saloon." Ethan and Sarah exchanged a glance. "Those men?" Sarah asked quietly. "They're brothers. The Kane gang. There's 5 of them total, 3 still in town, lords of the place now. Nobody dares stand against them." Margaret's voice turned bitter. "The whole town. 60-some people, and not one man willing to pin on a badge. So they rule through fear, taking what they want, doing what they please." "Why were you out here alone?" Ethan asked. "Running. Trying to get to Henderson Creek, to my sister. But they sent Ty and Ben after me, said they couldn't let word get out about James, about what they did to him." She grabbed Ethan's arm. "You have to help. If you're really who I think you are, if even half the stories are true..." "They're not," Ethan said firmly, pulling away. "Those stories are about a different man, a dead man. But we'll see you safely back to town," Sarah interjected, her voice gentle but firm. "Make sure the Kanes know you're under protection. After that, you'll need to find help elsewhere." Margaret looked between them, desperate hope dying in her eyes. "I see. I'm sorry to have bothered you, Mr. Rourke." The ride into Redstone Gulch was tense and silent. They caught Margaret's horse, got her mounted, and made for town with Sarah riding beside the traumatized widow, while Ethan ranged ahead, rifle across his saddle, eyes scanning the horizon. He told himself it was just caution, but some part of him was already scanning for threats, already falling back into old patterns he'd sworn to abandon. Redstone Gulch materialized out of the heat shimmer like a mirage of civilization. Main Street was a wide dirt avenue lined with false-fronted buildings that tried and failed to look permanent. The Silver Strike Hotel dominated one end, 3 stories of weathered wood that tilted slightly to the left. Across from it stood Hannigan's General Store, the Lucky Diamond Saloon, a boarding house, a doctor's office, and a handful of other enterprises that serviced the miners and drifters who flowed through town like dirty water. It was mid-afternoon when they rode in, and the street should have been busy. But as they entered town, Ethan noticed the emptiness. Doors closed as they passed. Window curtains twitched shut. The few people visible on the boardwalks found urgent reasons to be elsewhere, a town holding its breath. They hitched their horses outside the general store. Margaret dismounted shakily, and Sarah took her arm. "Thank you," Margaret said again. "I know you don't want to be involved, but just by bringing me back, you've..." "Mrs. Dalton!" They turned. A man emerged from the Lucky Diamond, moving with the loose-limbed confidence of someone who owned the space around him. He was in his 30s, tall and lean, with dark hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. 2 men flanked him, one built like a bull, the other thin and twitchy, hand never far from his gun. "Lucas Kane," Margaret whispered, fear cracking her voice. Lucas approached with that predator's grace, his eyes moving from Margaret to Sarah to Ethan, cataloging, assessing, dismissing. "Now, Margaret, where have you been?" he asked, all false concern. "We were worried, sick when you disappeared. Poor thing, still grieving your husband, not thinking straight." He reached for her arm. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." "She is somewhere safe," Ethan said quietly. Lucas's hand stopped. His smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "I'm sorry, friend, don't believe we've met. You new to Redstone Gulch? Passing through? Heard the lady was in distress, offered assistance." "That's real neighborly of you." Lucas's gaze flicked over Ethan's worn clothes, his lack of visible weapons. But see, Margaret's practically family. We'll take care of her now. I'd rather go to the doctor, Margaret said, finding her voice. Dr. Vance will... Doc's busy. Got a patient needs tending. Lucas's voice hardened just a fraction. Come on now, don't make this difficult. The bull-like man moved to grab Margaret's other arm. Without thinking, Ethan stepped between them. Touch her, and find out what difficult really means. Everything stopped. The twitchy gunman's hand moved to his pistol. The bull stopped mid-reach. Lucas's smile finally died. You threatening me, stranger? Stating fact. The lady wants to see the doctor, so she's going to see the doctor. And you're going to make sure of that? Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in it. You and what gun? I don't see you carrying. Don't need a gun to know bullying when I see it. Now back off. For a long moment, Lucas studied Ethan with new interest. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost curious. What's your name, friend? Not your friend. Fair enough. Lucas stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. Tell you what, out of respect for your bravery, and because I'm in a generous mood, I'll let this slide. Margaret can see the doc, but you should know, stranger, that Redstone Gulch has certain understandings, ways things work, and interrupting Kane business tends to end poorly. Noted, Lucas tipped his hat to Sarah. Ma'am, enjoy your stay in town, however long it lasts. He walked away, his men following, but the twitchy one kept looking back, hands still hovering near his gun. They disappeared into the Lucky Diamond, and only then did Ethan realize he'd been holding his breath. You shouldn't have done that, Margaret whispered. Lucas is the worst of them. Smarter than his brothers, meaner too. He'll remember this. Good, Sarah said grimly. Let him. They escorted Margaret to the doctor's office, a tidy building wedged between the boarding house and the assayer's office. Inside, they found a man in his 40s, clean-shaven with intelligent eyes and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. He looked up from rolling bandages and immediately went to Margaret. Good Lord, Mrs. Dalton, what happened? Ty and Ben Kane happened, Margaret said, and started crying again. Dr. Caleb Vance's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. Come, sit down. Let me look at you. He glanced at Ethan and Sarah. You brought her in? Found her on the road, Ethan said. Thought she could use proper care. That was wise. Vance began examining Margaret's injuries with careful hands, and brave given the current climate. I'm Caleb Vance, town doctor, such as we have a town anymore. That bad? Worse. Since James Dalton's murder, the Kanes have had free rein. They've robbed the assayer's office, strong-armed the merchants for protection money, assaulted 3 women that I know of. Anyone who speaks up gets beaten or worse. His voice dropped. We've become a town of cowards, myself included. You could leave, Sarah said. All of you. Some have, but most folks have everything they own tied up in their claims or their businesses. They can't just walk away. He finished his examination of Margaret. Nothing broken, thank the Lord, but you'll be sore for a week. I need to leave, Margaret said. Get to my sister in Henderson Creek. Can you help me? Vance hesitated, and in that hesitation, Ethan saw the same fear that permeated the whole town. Margaret, if the Kanes see me helping you escape, I understand. Margaret's voice was hollow. Everyone understands. That's why they're winning. Silence fell over the small office. Outside, the town continued its fearful pantomime of normalcy. Ethan moved to the window, looking out at the street. He'd come here for supplies. Quick and quiet, he'd promised Sarah. Get what they needed and leave. This wasn't his town, wasn't his fight. He'd left this world behind, sworn off the violence that had defined his life. What happened in Redstone Gulch was tragic, but it wasn't his responsibility to... Mr. Rourke? He turned. Dr. Vance was looking at him strangely. I thought I recognized you, Ethan Rourke. They say you killed 15 men in Montana. 12, Ethan corrected automatically, then wished he hadn't. They say you were the fastest gun in 3 territories. Was, past tense. But you're here now. Vance's eyes held desperate hope. You could... No. Ethan's voice was flat, final. I'm not that man anymore. Haven't been for 5 years. I'm sorry for your troubles, doctor, but we're just here for supplies. We'll be gone by morning. He could feel Sarah's eyes on him, but she said nothing. She knew his past, knew what it had cost him to walk away from violence. She wouldn't ask him to go back. Of course, Vance said quietly. Forgive me. I shouldn't have presumed. They stayed while Vance finished tending to Margaret, then walked back out into the brutal afternoon heat. The general store was just across the street. I'll get what we need, Sarah said. Why don't you check on the horses? They both knew she was giving him space to think. He nodded and walked back toward where they'd tied up their mounts. But as he approached, he saw 3 men waiting by the hitching post. Not the Kanes. These were townsmen, shopkeepers by the look of them, with soft hands and nervous eyes. Mr. Rourke, the oldest, a man in his 50s with a merchant's paunch, stepped forward. Could we have a word? Make it quick. That is, the town council, what's left of it. We'd like to offer you a position. Ethan laughed, a bitter sound. Let me guess. Sheriff? The badge is just sitting in the office, another man said, younger, with a clerk's posture. Nobody's had the courage to pin it on since James died. But you stood up to Lucas Kane without flinching. That takes a special kind of man. Foolish kind, you mean? Brave kind, the merchant insisted. Look, we can pay you. Not much, but we'll take up a collection. $20 a week, plus room and board. And we'd be grateful, Mr. Rourke. The whole town would be in your debt. You want me to clean up your mess? We want someone to restore order, to give us a chance to live without fear. The merchant's voice cracked. My daughter is 12 years old. Last week, Silas Kane, Lucas's older brother, he looked at her in a way that made my blood run cold. I can't sleep at night wondering when he'll decide to... He couldn't finish. Ethan closed his eyes. He'd known towns like this, seen how they rotted from the inside when evil went unchecked, but he'd also paid the price for being the man who checked it. How many times had he stood in dusty streets, gun in hand, watching the life drain out of another human being? How many times had he seen his own death reflected in a dead man's eyes? I'm sorry, he said, and meant it, but I'm not your man. Find someone else. There is no one else, the clerk burst out. We've asked everyone within 100 miles. Nobody wants to face the Kanes. Nobody except... Nobody, Ethan repeated. That's your answer. I walked away from that life, and I'm not walking back. He turned to go, but the merchant caught his arm. At least think about it. One night. That's all we ask. Sleep on it, and if you still say no in the morning, we'll leave you be. Ethan pulled his arm free, but less roughly than he might have. These men were desperate, and desperation made people grasp at any straw. One night won't change my answer. Maybe not, but we had to try. They left him there by the horses. 3 men walking back to businesses that fear had turned into prisons. Ethan checked the saddles, the supplies, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind quiet. But he could feel the weight of the town pressing down on him, all those fearful eyes watching from behind curtains, wondering if the stranger might be their salvation. Sarah emerged from the general store with 2 clerks carrying their supplies. As they loaded everything onto the pack horse, she kept stealing glances at Ethan. They offered you the sheriff job, she said. It wasn't a question. They did. And you said no. I did. She was quiet for a moment, helping secure the ropes. What are you thinking? That we should find the cheapest room in town, sleep with our door locked, and leave at first light. That's your head talking. What's your gut saying? Ethan looked down the street toward the Lucky Diamond. Through the saloon's dirty windows, he could see shadows moving, hear rough laughter. Somewhere in there, the Kane brothers were celebrating another day of unchallenged tyranny. My gut is saying this is exactly the kind of situation I swore to avoid. But I keep seeing that merchant's face when he talked about his daughter. Keep thinking about Margaret Dalton riding alone on that road and what would have happened if we hadn't been there. He met Sarah's eyes. And I keep wondering how a man sleeps at night knowing he had the power to help and chose not to. Sarah reached up and touched his face. You're not responsible for saving every town, Ethan. You saved yourself. That's enough. Is it? Before she could answer, the sound of breaking glass erupted from the Lucky Diamond. A man stumbled out, blood streaming from his nose, and crashed into the dirt. Lucas Kane appeared in the doorway, shaking his hand like he'd just done something mildly unpleasant. "That's for watering the whiskey, Chen," Lucas called out. "Do it again, and I'll burn your place down with you in it." The Asian merchant scrambled to his feet and ran, not looking back. Lucas watched him go, then noticed Ethan watching. That cold smile returned. "Evening, stranger. Decided to stick around, I see. Needed supplies." "Sure you did." Lucas leaned against the doorframe. "Word is the town council made you an interesting offer. Sheriff Rourke. Has a nice ring to it." "Not interested." "Smart man. See, thing about wearing a badge in this town, it tends to get you killed. Just ask Sheriff Dalton." "Oh wait, you can't. He's dead." Lucas laughed at his own joke. "But hey, if you change your mind, come see me first. We can discuss terms. Maybe reach an understanding that'd keep you alive longer than old James managed." Ethan felt Sarah's hand on his arm, a gentle warning. He took a breath, forced himself to relax. "I'll keep that in mind." "You do that." Lucas tipped his hat in mock salute and went back inside. They found rooms at the boarding house, 2 small spaces with thin walls and thinner mattresses, but clean enough. After securing their belongings, they met in Ethan's room as the sun began its descent toward the western ridges. "We could still leave tonight," Sarah said, sitting on the narrow bed. "Ride out in the dark. Let the town figure out its own problems." "We could." Ethan stood at the window, watching Redstone Gulch settle into uneasy evening. Lamps flickered to life in windows. The saloon grew louder. Somewhere a baby cried. "But we won't." "No." "You were right earlier. I'm not responsible for saving every town." He turned to face her. "But I'm standing in this one, and those men are out there hurting people because nobody will stand against them. That's not some distant problem I can ignore. It's happening right now, right outside that window." "So you're going to take the badge?" "I don't know yet. I need." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "I need to think." "Well, think fast, because Lucas Kane looked at you like a cat looks at a mouse. He's already decided you're a problem that needs solving." "Let him try." Sarah stood and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "Listen to me, Ethan Rourke. I fell in love with the man you are, not the man you were. The man I know chops wood and mends fences and hasn't touched a gun in 3 years. I don't want to lose him to some dusty street justice. I don't want to become another Margaret Dalton crying over a coffin." "You won't. You can't promise that. Not if you pin on that badge. Not if you go to war with 5 killers." Her grip tightened. "I'm not asking you to be a coward. I'm asking you to think about what you're trading. Your peace, your soul, us." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I know, but Sarah, if I walk away from this, I'll carry it with me. Every time we sit by our fire, I'll see that merchant's face. Every time I hold you, I'll wonder what happened to the people I could have helped. That's a different kind of haunting. Then find another way. You said you swore off killing, so don't kill. Be sheriff without being a killer. Use your head instead of your gun. The Kanes won't be talked down. Then outthink them, outmaneuver them. You're smart, Ethan. You survived 2 decades as a gunfighter not just because you were fast, but because you were smarter than the men trying to kill you." She pulled back to look at him. "If you're going to do this, and I can see you've already decided you are, then do it your way, not the old way." He kissed her then, grateful for her understanding, her strength, her refusal to let him slip back into old patterns without a fight. "All right," he said when they finally broke apart. "My way. No guns, just nerve and strategy. And if it goes wrong, we leave together. We get on those horses and we ride, and we don't look back." "Deal." They ate dinner at the boarding house, thin stew and hard bread that tasted like survival. Afterward, Ethan walked the town alone, learning its rhythms, its hiding places, its possibilities. Redstone Gulch was smaller than he'd thought. Maybe 100 permanent residents and twice that in transient miners. The main street formed a rough cross with 2 side streets. Beyond the commercial buildings, tents and rough shacks sprawled up the hillsides where the mines scarred the earth. He saw the sheriff's office, dark and empty, its door hanging crooked on broken hinges. Saw the assayer's office with its reinforced door, Reinforced but splintered now, the Kane robbery having overcome its defenses. Saw families hurrying home before full dark, saw shutters being bolted, saw a town imprisoning itself against its own demons. Near midnight, he stood outside the Lucky Diamond, listening to the drunken laughter and off-key piano. Through the window, he could see 4 of the Kane brothers, Lucas holding court at a poker table, the twitchy one from earlier drinking alone at the bar, and 2 others he hadn't met yet. One was massive, probably the Silas the merchant had mentioned. The other seemed younger, maybe late 20s, with a cruel pretty boy face that probably got him everything he wanted until it didn't. 5 brothers total, Margaret had said, 1 still unaccounted for. As he watched, Lucas looked up and spotted him in the window. Their eyes met across the dirty glass. Lucas smiled that death's head smile and raised his whiskey glass in salute. Ethan walked back to the boarding house, feeling the weight of what he was about to do settling onto his shoulders like a physical thing. In his room, he lit the lamp and sat on the bed, staring at his hands. Calloused hands. Scarred hands. Hands that had built a cabin and split firewood and held Sarah gentle in the dark. But also hands that had killed 12 men. Hands that remembered the weight of a gun even after 3 years without one. Could those hands pin on a badge without picking up a weapon? Could a man bring order without violence? Could Ethan Rourke be something he'd never been before? A lawman who didn't kill? He didn't know. But he was about to find out. At first light, he found the remaining town council members at the general store. The merchant from yesterday, his name was Hannigan, owner of the store, nearly dropped his coffee when Ethan walked in. "I'll take the job," Ethan said without preamble. "But on my terms." "Anything," Hannigan breathed. "Name it. First, I don't carry a gun. I enforce the law without killing." The men exchanged uncertain glances. "Mr. Rourke," the clerk said carefully, "the Kanes won't respect that kind of Second," Ethan continued, "what I say goes. No town council overruling me, no citizens taking the law into their own hands. If I'm sheriff, I'm sheriff completely." "Agreed." "Third, anyone who wants to stand with me, I'll deputize, but they follow my orders without question." "We can find volunteers," Hannigan said, though he sounded doubtful. "Fourth and final, when this is over, when the Kanes are dealt with, I'm done. I won't be your permanent sheriff. You'll need to find someone else or learn to stand up for yourselves." "That's fair." Ethan studied their faces, seeing hope warring with fear. "Then swear me in. Let's get this started before I change my mind." 20 minutes later, Ethan Rourke stood in the sheriff's office with a tin star pinned to his chest and no gun on his hip. Dr. Vance had agreed to be his first deputy, along with 2 miners named Hicks and Stone who'd lost friends to Kane violence. Sarah stood in the corner, arms crossed, her face carefully neutral. "Right," Ethan said, looking at his unlikely posse. "Here's how this works. We're not going to shoot it out with the Kanes. We're going to be smarter than them. We're going to use law, leverage, and psychology. And we're going to show this town that courage doesn't require a gun." "How?" Vance asked. "By starting small. Every journey begins with a single step, right?" Ethan picked up the broom, leaning in the corner. "We're going to clean this office. Make it look like we mean business. Then we're going to arrest someone." "Who?" Ethan smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "The first Kane brother stupid enough to break the law where I can see it. Shouldn't take long." It didn't. By noon, the sheriff's office looked almost respectable. They'd repaired the door, swept the floors, even found the old wanted posters and tacked them back up. Word had spread that Ethan Rourke had taken the badge, and a small crowd had gathered across the street, watching, waiting to see what would happen. What happened was this. The pretty boy Kane brother, Ethan learned his name was Jesse, came stumbling out of the Lucky Diamond at noon, drunk and mean. He saw old Chen trying to repair his storefront and decided to have some fun. "Hey, Chinaman," Jesse shouted, kicking over Chen's ladder. "I told you to stay off the street during daylight. Makes the place look dirty." Chen scrambled away, too frightened to speak. Jesse laughed and kicked the ladder again, this time into Chen himself, catching him in the ribs. "Maybe I should teach you some manners." "Kane!" Jesse turned. Ethan stood in the middle of the street 10 yards away, his new badge catching the sun. "Oh, this is precious," Jesse said, grinning. The stranger got himself a tin star. "Hey, Lucas," he called toward the saloon. "Come see this." "Leave Chen alone and move along," Ethan said calmly. "Or what? You gonna arrest me, Sheriff?" Jesse's hand dropped to his gun. "Go ahead and try." Public intoxication, assault, disturbing the peace. That's 3 charges. You can come peacefully, or you can make this difficult. Lucas emerged from the saloon, his other brothers following. They spread out across the street, forming a loose line. Ethan's deputies started to move from the office, but he held up a hand, stopping them. "This is between me and Jesse," he called. "No need for anyone else to get involved." "You're really going to do this?" Lucas asked, sounding almost amused. "You're going to try and arrest my baby brother without a gun?" "Don't need a gun to uphold the law." "This should be entertaining," Lucas said, stepping back. "Go ahead, Jesse. Show the sheriff what happens to heroes in this town." Jesse's grin widened. His hand closed on his pistol grip. "Last chance to walk away, Tin Star." "Same to you." The street went silent. Somewhere a shutter creaked. A horse stamped. The watching townspeople held their collective breath. Jesse drew. But Ethan was already moving, had been moving since Jesse's eyes telegraphed the intention half a second before his hand could follow. 20 years of reading opponents, of surviving by being one thought ahead, compressed into pure action. He stepped left and forward simultaneously, inside Jesse's draw, his right hand catching the younger man's wrist before the gun cleared leather. His left hand came up in a short, sharp jab that caught Jesse just below the sternum, driving the air from his lungs. Jesse gasped, doubling over. Ethan twisted the gun arm, applying pressure to the wrist until fingers spasmed open and the pistol fell. He caught it with his free hand and tossed it aside, then swept Jesse's legs out from under him. The young outlaw hit the dirt hard, still trying to remember how to breathe. The whole thing had taken maybe 3 seconds. Ethan knelt beside Jesse, pulling the kid's arms behind his back and producing a pair of handcuffs that Vance had found in the office. "Jesse Kane, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent, though I suspect you'll exercise your right to complain loudly instead." He looked up at Lucas, whose amusement had curdled into something colder. "You can collect him from the jail after he sobers up and pays his fine," Ethan said. $20 or 3 days in a cell, his choice." Lucas's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Behind him, his brothers looked uncertain, as if the world had just tilted slightly and they couldn't quite get their balance back. Ethan hauled Jesse to his feet and marched him toward the office, very aware of the 4 guns at his back. But no shots came. Not yet. He'd surprised them, embarrassed them, but he hadn't yet hurt them enough to demand immediate retaliation. That would come later. As he locked Jesse in the single cell, the kid alternating between cursing and wheezing, Ethan heard the sound he'd been waiting for. Applause. Tentative at first, then growing. The townspeople, emerging from their hiding places, clapping for their new sheriff who'd faced down a Kane without firing a shot. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "You made your point," she said quietly, "but you also just painted a target on your back." "I know." "They'll come for you now. All of them." "I know that too." He looked at her, this woman who'd given him a reason to live beyond violence. "But I'm not the man I was. I'm not going to kill them. I'm just going to show them that fear is a choice, and I choose differently." She shook her head, but she was almost smiling. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the craziest." "Can't I be both?" Outside, the afternoon sun beat down on Redstone Gulch, and in the Lucky Diamond, 4 Kane brothers gathered around a table and began planning the sheriff's very permanent removal. The war for the town had begun. Jesse Kane spent his first night in jail cursing, his second night sulking, and by the morning of his 3rd day, he'd gone quiet in a way that made Ethan's instincts prickle. A cornered animal was dangerous, but a silent one was calculating. "Your fine's been paid," Ethan said, unlocking the cell door. He'd slept in the office, taking turns with Vance on watch, knowing that Lucas wouldn't let this insult stand forever. Jesse stepped out, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had chafed. His pretty boy face was harder now, all the boyish charm burned away by 72 hours of humiliation. "You made a mistake, Sheriff." "Probably made several. Which one concerns you?" "Thinking this badge makes you untouchable." Jesse collected his gun from the desk. Ethan had made a show of returning it, empty, establishing that he wasn't afraid of an armed Kane. My brothers wanted to burn this place down with you in it. I talked them out of it. How generous. Not generous, strategic. Jesse holstered his pistol, his movements deliberate. See, killing you quick would make you a martyr. These sheep out there would remember the brave sheriff who stood up to the big bad Kanes. But if we break you slow, show everyone that courage just gets you hurt, then the town stays scared. Stays ours. Ethan leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You've given this some thought. Had time to think. Jesse smiled, and it was like watching ice crack. Enjoy your victory, Sheriff. It's the last one you'll get. He walked out into the morning sun, and Ethan watched him go, feeling the shape of things shifting. Jesse was right about one thing. This wasn't about quick violence anymore. The Kanes were going to make this personal, make it last, make it hurt. That sounded like a threat, Vance said from the doorway. He'd arrived early, bringing coffee and the kind of worried expression that had become permanent in the 3 days since Ethan took the badge. It was a promise. Ethan accepted the coffee gratefully. How's the town? Nervous. Happy the Kanes got shown up, but waiting for the hammer to fall. Vance sat down heavily in the spare chair. Hannigan says business is up, though. People feel safe enough to shop during the day. Chen's back to repairing his store. Small victories. Small victories add up. Ethan moved to the window, watching the street come to life. Women hung laundry, miners trudged toward the hills. A dog chased a chicken between buildings. Normal moments in an abnormal time. Any word from Margaret Dalton? Left yesterday for Henderson Creek. Took the stage with a mining family heading that direction. She wanted me to thank you again. One less person to worry about. Ethan sipped his coffee, planning. I need you to do something for me today. Name it. Talk to the miners. Quietly. Find out if there's anyone who might know about the Kanes' plans. Someone they've talked to, bragged to, threatened. These men aren't careful when they think they're in control. Vance nodded slowly. I'll see what I can learn. What about you? I'm going to walk the town, show the flag, remind people that the law still exists here. Without a gun. Without a gun, Ethan confirmed. After Vance left, Ethan stood alone in the office, feeling the weight of the badge on his chest. 3 days he'd worn it, and already he could feel the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. The hyper-awareness, the constant calculation of angles and distances, the way his body wanted to reach for a weapon that wasn't there. Fighting without killing was harder than he'd imagined. Every confrontation was a chess match where the opponent could flip the board at any moment. Sarah appeared in the doorway, 2 plates of breakfast in hand. Thought you might be hungry? Starving. He took a plate, eggs and bacon from the boarding house, simple but hot. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing each other's thoughts without needing words. Jesse's out, she said finally. Yeah. He's going to tell his brothers you're vulnerable. That's the idea. She set down her fork. Ethan, I know what you're doing. You're using yourself as bait, drawing them out into the open where witnesses can see, where the law has standing. It's the only way to do this without guns. Make them come to me. Make them break the law publicly. Arrest them legally. And if they decide to just shoot you in the back one dark night, then I was wrong about being able to do this without violence. He met her eyes. But I have to try, Sarah, because if I pick up a gun again, I won't stop at one. I'll become what I was, and that man doesn't deserve you. She reached across the small desk and took his hand. That man fought his way out of hell to find peace. Don't sell him short, and don't forget, you're not alone in this. I'm here. Vance is here. This whole town is starting to believe again. Belief's a fragile thing. So is courage. But you've shown them it exists. She squeezed his hand. Just promise me you'll be careful. I promise. She left him to his breakfast and his thoughts, and Ethan finished eating while reviewing the town map he'd drawn. Every building, every alley, every sight line. Knowing terrain was half the battle. The other half was knowing your enemy. He spent the morning making his presence felt, walking Main Street with deliberate visibility. He stopped to talk with Hannigan at the general store, learning that the Kanes had been extorting $2 a week from every business. Ethan made a show of recording this in a small notebook, official documentation of crimes that would eventually need accounting. At Chen's place, the old merchant was replacing broken windows. He looked up nervously as Ethan approached. "Sheriff?" Chen said, his English heavily accented but clear. "Thank you for before, with Jesse Kane." "Just doing the job." Ethan examined the new glass, quality work. "How long have the Kanes been bothering you?" "Since they come to town. 6 months now. Before, Redstone Gulch was good place, hard but fair. After they kill Sheriff Dalton, everything changed." "Did you see what happened the night Dalton died?" Chen's face closed down, fear flickering in his eyes. "I see nothing. I hear shot. I hide. Is safer." "I understand, but Chen, if you did see something, or if you hear anything, you can tell me. I won't let them hurt you." The merchant studied Ethan for a long moment, weighing trust against terror. "I think about it," he finally said. "Maybe I remember something, maybe not. Need time." It was more than Ethan had hoped for. "Take your time. I'll be here." He continued his rounds, stopping at the assayer's office, where a nervous young man named Peters showed him the damage from the Kane robbery. They'd taken $300 in gold dust, beaten Peters unconscious, and destroyed his records. "I tried to stop them," Peters said, shame coloring his voice. "But there were 3 of them, and I'm not a fighting man." "Takes more courage to face them unarmed than with a gun," Ethan said, and meant it. "You survived. That's what matters." By noon, he'd made a circuit of the town and returned to the office to find Hicks and Stone waiting, his 2 minor deputies, rough men with the kind of practical toughness that came from working underground. "Sheriff," Hicks said, a compact man with powder burns scarring his forearms, "got a problem down at the Lucky Diamond." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Silas Kane is drunk and looking for a fight. He's been talking about you for the last hour, getting himself worked up. We figured you'd want to know before it spills into the street." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Silas was the eldest Kane, the biggest, and by reputation the meanest. The merchant's words came back to him, the way Silas had looked at his 12-year-old daughter. Some men didn't need reasons to hurt people. They hurt because they could. "Right," Ethan said, checking his resolve like a man might check his gun. "Let's go have a conversation." "You want us to come with you?" Stone asked, a tall man going gray at the temples. "No, stay here. Watch the office. If this goes wrong, I don't want you caught in the middle." "Ethan," Stone said carefully, "Silas ain't like Jesse. He won't let you embarrass him. He'll kill you if he gets the chance." "Then I won't give him the chance." The Lucky Diamond was nearly empty at midday. Just the bartender, a few professional drinkers, and Silas Kane occupying a table near the back. He was massive, 6'4", and thick through the shoulders, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then beaten with hammers. When Ethan walked in, Silas looked up from his whiskey and smiled. "Well, well, the hero sheriff, come to visit." His voice was a bass rumble, each word deliberate. "I was just talking about you." "Nothing good, I imagine," Ethan said, staying near the door, keeping his escape route clear. "Actually, I was saying how impressed I was. Taking down Jesse without a gun, that takes balls." Silas drained his glass and poured another from the bottle on the table. "Of course, Jesse's young, inexperienced. Me, I'm neither of those things." "Is there a point to this conversation, or are you just drinking and talking?" Silas's smile widened. "Direct. I like that." "Here's the point, Sheriff. You've had your fun. You made your stand, showed the town you got spine. Now it's time to be smart. Take your woman, ride out. Forget you ever pinned on that badge." "And if I don't?" "Then me and my brothers will make you wish you had." Silas stood, unfolding to his full intimidating height. "See, Lucas wants to be clever about this. Wants to break you slow, public-like. But I'm a simple man. I see a problem, I end it." He moved then faster than a man his size had any right to move. His fist came around in a haymaker that would have taken Ethan's head off if it connected. But Ethan had been watching his eyes, had seen the intention building, and he ducked under the blow, stepping inside Silas's reach. The big man's momentum carried him forward, off balance. Ethan drove his shoulder into Silas's midsection, not trying to hurt him, just trying to move him, redirect his force. They crashed into a table, wood splintering under their combined weight. Silas roared, throwing Ethan off with brute strength. The sheriff rolled, came up fast, backing toward the door. Silas charged again, a bull in human form, and Ethan sidestepped, letting him crash into the bar. Bottles shattered. The bartender dove for cover. "Stand still and fight," Silas bellowed, blood trickling from his scalp where he'd hit the bar's edge. "Why? So you can hit me?" Ethan was breathing hard now, adrenaline singing in his veins. This was the danger, not the fight itself, but the familiar rush of it, the way his body remembered being in combat and wanted more. "I'm not here to fight you, Silas. I'm here to tell you to go home and sleep it off." The hell with that. Silas grabbed a chair and threw it. Ethan barely dodged, the wood exploding against the wall behind him. This was deteriorating fast, and in a moment Silas would remember he had a gun on his hip. "Last warning," Ethan said, his voice hard. "Stand down, or I arrest you for assault on a peace officer." Silas laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. "You and what army?" The door opened behind Ethan. He didn't need to look to know who it was. He could feel Sarah's presence, hear her boot heels on the wooden floor. "This army," she said calmly, and when Ethan glanced back, she was holding his rifle, not quite pointed at Silas, but definitely in his direction. Silas's laughter died. His hand moved toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Sarah said. "Unlike my husband, I have no problem shooting a man who needs shooting. And you, Silas Kane, are making a very strong case for needing it." For a long moment, nobody moved. The bartender held his breath. Somewhere in the back, a clock ticked. Silas's fingers hovered over his gun, calculation replacing rage in his eyes. "This ain't over," he finally said. "It is for today," Ethan replied. "Now get out of here before I change my mind about arresting you." Silas straightened, brushing splinters from his shirt. He looked at Sarah with something that might have been respect or might have been hatred. With him it was hard to tell. "Your woman's got more spine than you do, Sheriff." "I know," Ethan said. "I'm lucky that way." Silas walked out, shouldering past them with deliberate force. When he was gone, Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I thought we agreed you'd be careful," Sarah said, lowering the rifle. "That was me being careful. You should see me when I'm reckless." She didn't smile. "Ethan, this is escalating. First Jesse, now Silas. How long before one of them decides to stop playing games?" "I know, but I'm showing the town that the Kanes can be stood up to. Every time I face one and walk away, their power diminishes." "Or you're just making them angrier." Before he could respond, Vance rushed in, his face flushed from running. "Ethan, we've got a situation." "What kind?" "The kind where Lucas Kane just announced there's a town meeting tonight at the saloon. Says he wants to discuss the future of Redstone Gulch with all concerned citizens." Vance's expression was grim. "He's planning something." Ethan and Sarah exchanged a glance. A public meeting meant witnesses, meant some limit to the violence Lucas could deploy. But it also meant confrontation on his terms, in his territory. "What time?" Ethan asked. 8 o'clock. Says attendance is mandatory for anyone who wants to keep doing business in town. Then I guess I'll be there. The afternoon crawled by in tense preparation. Ethan walked the town again, this time noting which buildings had clear sight lines to the Lucky Diamond, which alleys offered escape routes, which rooftops might hide a shooter. He was planning for combat without admitting he was planning for combat, trying to maintain his oath while preparing for its inevitable breaking. At the boarding house, Sarah packed their essentials into saddlebags. "Just in case," she said when he asked. "If tonight goes wrong, we might need to leave fast." "It won't come to that." "Ethan, promise me something." He sat beside her on the bed. "Anything. If it comes down to them or you, choose you. Choose us. Don't die for this town's pride." "I won't die." "You can't know that." "No," he admitted. "But I can make it unlikely. I've been in worse situations than this." "That was when you carried a gun." "That was when I relied on a gun. There's a difference." He took her hands. "Trust me?" She looked at him for a long time, seeing past the badge and the bravado to the man beneath. Flawed, haunted, but trying desperately to be better than his history. "I trust you," she said finally. "I just wish you trusted yourself as much." As dusk settled over Redstone Gulch, the town began moving toward the Lucky Diamond like iron filings toward a magnet. Miners came down from the hills. Merchants closed their shops early. Families emerged from their homes with the reluctant shuffle of people summoned before a king they hadn't chosen. Ethan waited until most of the crowd had gathered before making his entrance. He wanted to be seen arriving, wanted people to know their sheriff was there, present, unafraid. Sarah stayed at the boarding house despite her protests. This was one situation where her presence would complicate more than help. The Lucky Diamond was packed, standing room only, the air thick with whiskey fumes and nervous sweat. Lucas Kane sat at his usual table like a throne, his brothers arrayed behind him. Silas loomed with his arms crossed, still sporting the cut on his forehead from their earlier encounter. Jesse leaned against the bar, his pretty face twisted in a smirk. The twitchy one, Ethan had learned his name was Ben, kept his hand near his gun, eyes constantly moving. And there, standing slightly apart, was the one Kane brother Ethan hadn't met yet. He was different from the others, quieter, older maybe, with the kind of stillness that suggested either complete control or complete emptiness. Where his brothers broadcast violence, this one wore it like a second skin, invisible until you looked close. "Sheriff Rourke," Lucas called out, his voice carrying over the murmur of conversation. "So glad you could join us. Come, have a drink. We're all friends here." Ethan moved through the crowd, people parting for him, some with hope in their eyes, others with pity. He stopped at a comfortable distance from Lucas's table, close enough to talk, far enough to move. "I'm not much for drinking on duty," he said. "Let's get to why you called this meeting." Lucas smiled. "Direct as always." "I like that about you, Sheriff. No pretense." He stood, addressing the room now, performing for the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen of Redstone Gulch, we're at a crossroads. 3 days ago, you decided to hire a new sheriff, a man with a reputation, a history of violence, a killer." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Ethan kept his expression neutral. "Now, I've got no problem with killers," Lucas continued. "Some of my best friends are killers. But I do have a problem with hypocrisy. See, Sheriff Rourke here, he walks around without a gun, pretending to be civilized. But we all know what he is, what he was. A man doesn't change his nature just because he changes his location." "Is there a point to this theater?" Ethan asked. "The point, Sheriff, is that you're bad for business. Since you arrived, tensions are up. People are nervous. My brothers and I can't conduct our affairs without interference. This town was running just fine before you showed up." "Running scared, you mean?" "Running profitable. There's a difference." Lucas moved closer, his voice dropping to conversational tones meant to carry just far enough. "Here's what I'm proposing, a gentleman's agreement. You leave Redstone Gulch. Tonight. Take your woman, your badge, and your self-righteousness and ride out. In exchange, my brothers and I will reduce our protection fees, keep the peace ourselves, make sure business continues smoothly. And if I refuse?" Lucas's smile never wavered. "Then I'm afraid we'll have to insist, which would be unfortunate for everyone involved." Ethan looked around the room, seeing the faces of the townspeople. Hannigan clutching his hat, his daughter pressed against his leg, Chen standing near the back, barely visible, Peters from the assayer's office, Dr. Vance by the door, all of them watching, waiting to see if their sheriff would fold or fight. "I've got a counter-proposal," Ethan said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You and your brothers pay back everyone you've extorted. You return the gold you stole from the assayer's office. You leave Redstone Gulch and never come back. Do that, and I won't hunt you down and see you hang for murder." Silence crashed over the saloon like a wave. Lucas's smile finally died. "You're making a mistake, Sheriff." "Probably. But it's my mistake to make." Ethan turned to address the crowd directly. "I know you're scared. I know the Kanes have hurt you, stolen from you, murdered good people. But fear only works if you let it. I'm here to tell you that you don't have to let it anymore. The law exists, justice exists, and I'm going to prove it with or without a gun." He turned back to Lucas. "So here's how this is going to work. You've got until sundown tomorrow to start making restitution. If you don't, I start arresting you one by one, legally and publicly, until you're all in jail or gone. Your choice." Bold words. Lucas's eyes had gone flat, dead. "But you're forgetting something. There's 5 of us and 1 of you. Numbers don't matter when the law is on your side." "The law." Lucas laughed. "Sheriff, out here, The law is whoever has the most guns and the will to use them. And in case you haven't noticed, you don't even carry one. The quiet Kane brother moved then, stepping forward for the first time. His voice, when he spoke, was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more menacing. He doesn't need a gun, Lucas. He's fast enough to take it from you before you could pull the trigger. Lucas glanced at his brother, irritation flickering across his face. Stay out of this, Clay. But Clay was looking at Ethan now, really looking, with the kind of recognition that came from seeing a fellow traveler on a dark road. You killed 12 men in Montana, Clay said. It wasn't a question. I did. The Brennan gang took them all down in one afternoon. It was evening, actually, and I'm not proud of it. Clay's expression didn't change. You should be. Brennan was a rabid dog, world's better without him. He turned to Lucas. This man's not bluffing. He might not be carrying, but he's still dangerous. Then we'll just have to be more dangerous, Lucas said. He raised his voice again, playing to the crowd. You all heard the sheriff's ultimatum. Sundown tomorrow. Well, I've got one of my own. Sundown tomorrow, if Ethan Rourke is still wearing that badge, my brothers and I will give him exactly what he's asking for, a reckoning. But it won't be arrests and trials. It'll be blood and bullets. And anyone standing with him will get the same. He looked directly at Ethan. Last chance, Sheriff. Walk away while you still can. Ethan held his gaze, letting the silence stretch, letting everyone in that room see that he wasn't backing down. See you at sundown, he said quietly. He walked out of the Lucky Diamond with his back straight and his hands steady, very aware of the 5 guns behind him, any one of which could end his experiment in nonviolent justice. But no shots came. Not yet. Lucas wanted this public, wanted the town to see their sheriff broken before he was killed. Outside, the night air tasted like copper and rain. Storm clouds were rolling in from the west, turning the sky purple-black. Ethan stood in the street for a moment, letting his heart slow, letting the adrenaline drain. Vance appeared at his elbow. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Time will tell which. Ethan started walking toward the office. Gather everyone who might stand with us. I need to know how many people we can count on if this goes bad. Ethan, nobody's going to stand against 5 guns. You know that. Then I'll stand alone. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Ethan stopped, turning to face the doctor. Because if I back down or run away, then Lucas wins. The Kanes keep this town under their boot, and every person who dared to hope for better learns that hope is for fools. I can't let that happen. Vance studied him in the lamplight. You're really going to face them tomorrow, without a gun. That's the plan. It's a terrible plan. Got a better one? Vance thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, but let me help. Let me stand with you. Caleb, I'm serious. I've been a coward long enough. James Dalton was my friend, and I did nothing when they killed him. Let me do something now. Ethan wanted to refuse, wanted to keep this good man out of harm's way, but he could see the determination in Vance's eyes, the need to reclaim something he'd lost when he failed to act before. All right, Ethan said, but we do this smart. We do this my way. They spent the rest of the night planning. Hicks and Stone joined them, along with 3 other miners who'd worked with Dalton and wanted revenge. Hannigan came, apologetic but firm in his refusal to fight. He had his daughter to think about. Chen appeared near midnight with information that changed everything. I remember now, the old merchant said, his English carefully precise. The night Sheriff Dalton died. I see who shoot him. Everyone leaned forward. It was Clay Kane, the quiet one. He shoot Dalton in back, then walk away like nothing happened. No anger, no smile, just empty. Ethan absorbed this, the pieces falling into place. Clay was the killer among killers, the one who did the wet work without hesitation or remorse. That explained his recognition earlier. He'd seen in Ethan what Ethan had once been. Would you testify to that? Ethan asked. Chen's face went pale, but he nodded. If you protect me, I testify. Is right thing to do. Then we've got them, Vance said excitedly. Murder charge. We can arrest Clay, use him to bargain with the others. No, Ethan said slowly, an idea forming. We use him differently. Tomorrow, before sundown, I arrest Clay publicly for murder. Lucas will have to choose, let his brother hang or come for me directly. Either way, we force their hand on our terms. That's still 5 against 6, Stone pointed out. And they're gunfighters. We're not. We don't need to outgun them. We need to outthink them. Ethan stood, moving to the map he'd drawn. Lucas expects a shootout in the street, so we give him something different, something he can't predict. They planned until dawn, gaming out scenarios, preparing contingencies. When the sun finally rose on Ethan's 4th day as sheriff, he felt ready. Not confident, but ready. There was a difference. Sarah found him on the boarding house porch, watching the day begin. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Couldn't. Too much to think about." She sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "Tell me the plan." So he did, laying out every detail, every risk, every possible outcome. She listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "It could work," she finally said. "Or it could get you killed. Both things can be true." "Ethan, why are you really doing this? The truth." He thought about lying, about giving her the noble answer about justice and law and protecting the innocent, but she deserved better. "Because I need to know," he said. "I need to know if I can be this man, the one who doesn't kill, who doesn't solve every problem with violence. If I can't, if I have to go back to being what I was, then I'm not sure I can live with myself, and I'm certain I can't ask you to live with me." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You're already that man, you idiot. You've been that man for 3 years. This town, these Kanes, they're just a test, but you've already passed the one that matters." "What test is that?" "The one where you chose peace over revenge, building over destroying, me over your guns." She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens today, you're not the man you were. Remember that." At noon, Ethan pinned on his badge, checked his empty holster one last time, and walked out into the street. The town was eerily quiet, everyone locked inside, waiting for the storm, both the one rolling in from the west and the one about to break in their streets. He found Clay Kane alone outside the Lucky Diamond, smoking a cigarette, watching the clouds build. "Clay Kane," Ethan said formally, loudly enough for the faces in the windows to hear. "You're under arrest for the murder of James Dalton." Clay took a long drag on his cigarette, then dropped it, crushing it under his boot. "On what evidence?" "Eyewitness testimony. Chen saw you shoot Dalton in the back 3 weeks ago." "Chen," Clay smiled slightly. "Brave of him. Stupid, but brave. Are you going to come peacefully?" "No." Clay's hand moved to his gun, not drawing, just resting there. "But I'm not going to shoot you either, Sheriff. That's Lucas's pleasure. I'm just going to stand here until my brothers arrive, and then we'll see how your courage holds." Right on cue, the Lucky Diamond's doors opened. Lucas emerged first, followed by Silas, Jesse, and Ben. They spread out across the street, forming a line, 5 men with guns facing 1 man with a badge. The storm chose that moment to break. Rain began falling, fat, heavy drops that kicked up dust before turning the street to mud. Thunder rolled across the valley. "You really did it," Lucas called over the rain. "You really pushed this to the edge. I admire that, Sheriff. But admiration doesn't change the outcome." Ethan stood his ground, rain plastering his hair to his skull, his badge reflecting lightning. Behind him, he heard the office door open, Vance stepping out, then Hicks, then Stone, then the other 3 miners. They formed a line behind their sheriff, outnumbered and outgunned, but present. Lucas saw them and laughed. "A few townies with rifles? That's your army?" "It's enough," Ethan said. "Clay Kane is under arrest. The rest of you can ride out now, or you can face charges as accessories to murder. Your choice, but you've got about 10 seconds to make it." "Or?" Lucas's hand dropped to his gun. "Or nothing. I'm not drawing on you, Lucas. I'm arresting a murderer, legally, with witnesses present. You can try to stop me, but every person in this town will see it happen. Every person will know you chose lawlessness, and that story will follow you everywhere you go." For a moment, Lucas hesitated. The rain hammered down. Lightning forked across the sky. Behind the Kane brothers, Ethan saw townspeople emerging from buildings, drawn by the spectacle, forming a crowd of witnesses. Then Lucas made his decision. Take him, he said to his brothers, and 5 hands went for 5 guns. What happened next was chaos compressed into seconds. Ethan dove forward, not back, closing the distance to Clay before the quiet killer could draw. He hit Clay low and hard, using the bigger man's weight against him, both of them crashing into the mud. Behind him, guns roared. Vance and the miners fired high, aiming to scare rather than kill, bullets punching holes in the Lucky Diamond's facade. Jesse returned fire, lead whining past Ethan's head. Silas charged like the bull he was, heading straight for Ethan. But Ethan had planned for this. Hicks and Stone broke left and right, crossfire that forced the Kanes to scatter, to break their line. The crowd screamed and ran, but some stayed. Hannigan pulled his daughter to safety but remained at the edge, watching. Chen pressed himself against a wall, witnessing. Ethan wrestled Clay's gun away, threw it into the mud. Clay caught him with an elbow to the temple, stars exploding across his vision. They rolled, trading ineffective punches in the rain and muck. Then Silas was there, dragging Ethan off Clay by his collar, lifting him like a child. Ethan's feet kicked air. He couldn't breathe. "Got you now, Sheriff," Silas growled. Sarah's voice cut through the storm. "Let him go!" She stood in the street, rifle aimed, rain streaming down her face. Silas hesitated. And in that hesitation, Ethan drove his heel down onto Silas's instep, all his weight behind it. Bones cracked. Silas roared, dropping him. Ethan hit the mud, rolled, came up gasping. Around him the fight was scattering. Lucas and Ben had taken cover behind a water trough, returning fire at the miners. Jesse had retreated into the Lucky Diamond. Clay was climbing to his feet, murder in his eyes. This was spiraling out of control. This was becoming exactly what Ethan had tried to avoid. Then Dr. Vance did something unexpected. He stopped shooting. He stepped into the street, hands raised, and shouted loud enough to carry over the storm, "Enough!" Everyone froze. Vance stood there in the rain, unarmed now, vulnerable. "Look at us!" he yelled. "Look at what we're doing! Is this what Redstone Gulch has become? A killing ground? James Dalton didn't die so we could just replace one set of killers with another." He turned to Lucas. "You want to rule through fear? Fine. Shoot me. Right now. In front of everyone. Show them what you really are." Lucas's gun was trained on Vance, but he didn't fire. Couldn't, with all those witnesses watching. Vance turned to Ethan next. "And you came here to prove violence wasn't the answer, so prove it. Right now. Show us there's another way." Ethan stood in the mud, breathing hard, tasting blood. Every instinct screamed at him to finish this, to pick up one of the dropped guns and end the threat the way he'd ended threats for 20 years. It would be so easy, so familiar. But Sarah was watching, and Vance, and the whole town. He straightened, wiped rain from his eyes, and walked toward Clay Kane. "You're under arrest," he said quietly. "You can come now, or you can come after your brothers watch me beat you unconscious. Either way, you're coming." Clay looked at his brothers, at the crowd, at the sheriff standing before him offering a choice when he could have offered death. Something shifted in his empty eyes. "I'll come," he said. Lucas sputtered. "Clay, what are you—" "I'm tired, Lucas. Tired of running, tired of killing, tired of being this." Clay held out his wrists for cuffs. Maybe it's time we all were. The fight went out of the moment like air from a punctured lung. Silas hobbled to Lucas's side, his foot ruined. Jesse peered out from the saloon. Ben lowered his gun, confused. Ethan cuffed Clay, led him toward the office through the watching crowd. At the door, he turned back. "Sundown's in 6 hours," he called to the remaining Kane brothers. "You've got until then to decide if you want to end up like Clay or if you want to ride out and never come back. Choose wisely." He locked Clay in the cell, then collapsed into his chair, shaking with adrenaline and delayed fear. Vance stumbled in, followed by the miners, all unhurt, miraculously. Sarah appeared last, and Ethan pulled her close, feeling her heart hammer against his chest. "That was too close," she whispered. "I know. We could have died. I know. But we didn't." She pulled back to look at him. "And you didn't kill anyone, even when you could have, even when it would have been easier." He looked at his hands, muddy, bruised, but not bloody. Not this time. One down, Vance said, nodding toward Clay's cell. 4 to go. But before anyone could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the street. Fast, urgent. Ethan moved to the window and saw a rider coming hard through the rain, pushing his horse to the limit. The man practically fell off his mount in front of the office, stumbling inside. "Sheriff Rourke?" he gasped, water streaming from his hat. "That's me. Message from Henderson Creek. There's been a development, a big one." The rider pulled a soggy envelope from his coat and handed it over. Ethan opened it, read the contents, and felt everything shift again. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Ethan looked up, his expression grim. "Turns out there's a 6th Kane brother, named Silas Jr., and according to this, he just robbed the Henderson Creek Bank, killed 2 people, and he's headed this way with a gang of 15 men. The room went silent. "He's coming for his brothers," Ethan said. "All of them. And he's bringing an army." The storm hammered against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like approaching drums. The messenger collapsed into a chair, still heaving for breath. Rain drummed against the roof like fingers on a coffin lid. Ethan read the telegram again, hoping the words would change, knowing they wouldn't. 15 men, Vance said, the number hollow in his mouth. "We can't fight 15 men. 16, Stone corrected grimly. "Don't forget Silas Jr. himself." Ethan moved to the window, watching the storm tear at Redstone Gulch. The street had emptied after the shootout, everyone retreating to whatever safety 4 walls could provide. Across the way, he could see shadows moving in the Lucky Diamond, the remaining Kane brothers regrouping, probably celebrating the news of their reinforcements. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked the messenger. The man had caught his breath enough to answer. "Left Henderson Creek yesterday morning. Riding hard, they could be here by tomorrow afternoon, maybe sooner if they don't stop for the night." "They won't stop," Ethan said quietly. "Silas Jr. knows his brother's in jail. He'll push through." Hicks moved to stand beside Ethan at the window. "Sheriff, I'm not a coward, but I'm also not stupid. 6 of us against 16 professional killers? Those aren't odds, that's suicide." "Nobody's asking you to die here," Ethan replied. "Any of you want to leave, leave now. I won't think less of you." The miners exchanged glances. Stone spoke for them all. "We signed on to help clean up the town, not fight a damn war. I got a wife. Hicks has got youngsters. We can't." "I know. Go. Get your families and head for Henderson Creek before Silas Jr. arrives. Tell anyone who'll listen to do the same." They left, shame and relief warring on their faces. Ethan didn't blame them. Courage had limits, and asking ordinary men to face down a small army was beyond those limits. When they were gone, only Vance remained beside Sarah. "I'm staying," the doctor said. "Caleb, don't try to talk me out of it. I've made my choice." Vance's jaw was set, stubborn. "Besides, you'll need a doctor when this is over, if we're still alive to need one." "Then I'll patch up whoever's left standing." Vance managed a grim smile. "I didn't spend 4 years in medical school to run from a fight." Sarah moved to Ethan's side, her hand finding his. "We need a plan. A real one this time, not just hoping courage is enough." She was right. Ethan's brain was already working, calculating odds, considering terrain, gaming out scenarios. 3 people against 16 was impossible if it came to a straight fight. But war wasn't always straight, and the best victories came from changing the battlefield entirely. "The gold shipment," he said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "What gold shipment?" Vance asked. "The one that doesn't exist. Yet." Ethan's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. Lucas and his brothers have been terrorizing this town for months, bleeding it dry. They're not here for fun. They're here for profit. And the biggest profit in any mining town is gold. "I'm not following," Sarah said. Ethan turned from the window. "We spread a rumor, a big one. Say there's a major shipment of processed gold leaving Redstone Gulch in 3 days, heading to the federal mint. Enough gold to make every man in Silas Jr.'s gang rich." Vance's eyes widened. "You want to use fake gold as bait?" "Not fake. Real. We'll need enough actual gold to make it convincing." He looked at Vance. "How much gold dust and nuggets do you think the miners and merchants have stored up?" "Combined? Maybe $8,000–10,000 worth. Most folks keep their wealth in raw gold out here. Easier to transport than paper if you need to run. We ask them to loan it to us. temporarily. We load it into a wagon, make a show of preparing it for transport, and we make damn sure the Kanes know about it. Sarah was following his logic now. Silas Jr. won't be able to resist. Instead of a siege on the town, he'll go for the gold. Exactly. And when he does, we choose where the fight happens. Not in these streets where innocents could get caught in the crossfire, but out in the open, on our terms. That's still 16 against 3, Vance pointed out. Not if we're smart about it. Ethan moved to his desk, pulling out the map of the valley. There's a river crossing about 5 miles north, where the Henderson Creek Road fords the Red River. The banks are steep there, limited sight lines, water running fast from the storm. It's a natural choke point. He traced the route with his finger. We set up the ambush there. Make them think they're ambushing us, when really, we're the ones setting the trap. Vance studied the map. Even with terrain advantage, 3 guns against 16 is still bad odds. Then we don't rely on guns alone. We use everything we have, the terrain, the weather, the element of surprise. Ethan looked at both of them. I'm not going to lie and say this isn't dangerous. It is. It might get us killed, but it's the only play I can see that doesn't end with Redstone Gulch burned to the ground and everyone in it dead or scattered. The room fell silent except for the rain. Sarah squeezed his hand, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. Tell us what you need us to do. They spent the rest of the night planning, mapping, preparing. The storm blew itself out by dawn, leaving the world washed clean and the streets running with red mud. As the sun rose, Ethan began spreading his rumor. He started with Hannigan, taking the merchant aside in the general store. I need you to do something for me, Ethan said quietly. Something that requires you to be a good actor. Hannigan looked nervous. What kind of acting? The kind where you pretend to let something slip accidentally. I'm going to tell you about a gold shipment leaving town in 3 days, and you're going to mention it to the wrong people. Understanding dawned in Hannigan's eyes. You want the Kanes to hear about it. I want everyone to hear about it, especially Silas Jr. when he arrives. This is bait. It is, but it's also a chance to end this without the town becoming a battlefield. Ethan met his eyes. I need your help, Hannigan, and I need your gold. The merchant hesitated only a moment. How much? By mid-morning, Ethan had visited every merchant and successful miner in Redstone Gulch. Some refused outright, too afraid or too protective of their wealth. But enough agreed that by noon, they had a respectable pile of gold dust and nuggets assembled in the sheriff's office. Vance estimated it at close to $12,000. A fortune by any measure, and more than enough to make the bait irresistible. They loaded it into a reinforced strongbox, made a show of loading that into a wagon borrowed from the livery. Word spread like wildfire. By afternoon, everyone in town knew about the secret gold shipment, and everyone knew it was leaving in 3 days. Ethan was in the office checking supplies when Kane walked in. The outlaw moved with casual confidence, unarmed, his hands visible and empty. But there was danger in every line of his body, a coiled readiness that reminded Ethan of a snake sizing up its next meal. Sheriff, Lucas said, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. Heard an interesting rumor today. I imagine you hear lots of rumors. This one's particularly interesting. Something about a gold shipment heading out in a few days. Quite a bit of gold from what I hear. Ethan leaned back in his chair, keeping his expression neutral. News travels fast. In small towns, it does. Lucas sat down uninvited, making himself comfortable. Now, normally I'd figure that's none of my business, but my brother's sitting in your jail, and I'm starting to think maybe we can reach an understanding. What kind of understanding? The kind where you let Clay go, and me and my brothers ride out, peaceful-like. We forget about our differences, go our separate ways. And in exchange? Lucas smiled. In exchange, when my big brother shows up with his gang, we tell him to leave you alone. Silas Jr. listens to Clay. Always has. With Clay vouching for you, he'll probably just take his boys and move on. It was a tempting offer, and Ethan suspected that was exactly the point. Lucas wanted Clay out before Silas Jr. arrived, wanted to consolidate the family before whatever was coming next. Clay murdered James Dalton, Ethan said. He's going to stand trial for that. Trial, Lucas laughed. Sheriff, there's no judge within 100 miles, no trials happening anytime soon. Then he sits in jail until one does. Lucas's smile faded. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Story of my life. The outlaw stood, all pretense of friendliness evaporating. Fine, keep Clay. But when Silas Jr. gets here, when he brings his whole crew down on this town, remember I offered you a way out. I'll keep that in mind. Lucas paused at the door. One more thing. That gold shipment? Bad idea, Sheriff. Real bad idea. The kind that gets people killed. Thanks for the warning. When Lucas was gone, Sarah emerged from the back room where she'd been listening. He knows, she said. Of course he knows. That's the point. By nightfall, he'll have sent word to Silas Jr. about the gold, and Silas Jr. will come running. You're betting everything on this working. You have a better idea? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Silas Jr. and his gang arrived the next afternoon, riding in like an occupying army. Ethan watched from the office window as they filled the street, 16 hard men on harder horses, all carrying enough weapons to start a small war. They rode straight to the Lucky Diamond, where Lucas and his brothers waited. The eldest Kane was easy to spot. He dismounted with the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned his right to take whatever he wanted. He was older than Lucas, maybe 40, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent his life outdoors doing violent things. But it was his eyes that told the real story, flat, calculating, completely without mercy. Within an hour, the whole gang had taken over the Lucky Diamond. Drinking, gambling, celebrating their numbers. Ethan could hear their laughter from across the street, loud and ugly. They know about the gold, Vance said, joining him at the window. They know. Lucas will have told Silas Jr. everything by now. Think they'll take the bait? A man like Silas Jr. doesn't turn down easy money. He'll go for it. That night, Ethan barely slept. He kept watch from the office, his rifle across his lap, a concession to reality, though he still wore no pistol. Across the street, the Lucky Diamond blazed with light and noise until well past midnight. Around 3 a.m, he saw movement. 2 figures detached from the saloon, moving quietly through the darkness toward the livery where the gold wagon sat. Ethan watched them circle the wagon, checking the strongbox, confirming the gold's presence. Scouts. Making sure the prize was real before committing to the robbery. The next day, Ethan made his announcement. He stood on the porch of the sheriff's office and addressed the gathered townspeople, though his real audience was the men watching from the Lucky Diamond. The gold shipment leaves tomorrow at dawn, he called out. Dr. Vance and I will be escorting it to Henderson Creek. Anyone attempting to interfere will be met with lethal force. Lethal force. The words tasted like ash, but they were necessary. Had to make it convincing. Inside, Vance looked at him with concern. You really think they'll hit us on the road? I'd bet my life on it. In fact, I am betting my life on it. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Sarah rode out to the river crossing, scouting the terrain, identifying the best positions. She returned as the sun was setting, her face grim. It'll work, she said, but barely. The ford is narrow, banks about 15 feet high on both sides. Plenty of cover in the rocks, but once they realize it's a trap, we'll be pinned down. How long can we hold them? Long enough, maybe, if we're lucky and they're stupid. I'll take those odds. That night, they loaded the real gold into the wagon along with several boxes of rocks to make up the weight. Ethan had considered using only rocks, but if the Kanes checked, and they would, the ruse would fail before it started. Better to risk the real gold and use it to draw out their enemies. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. Around midnight, he gave up and went to find Sarah. She was sitting on the porch of the boarding house, watching the stars emerge from behind the last of the storm clouds. Can't sleep either? She asked as he sat beside her. Too much thinking. About tomorrow? About everything. He took her hand. Sarah, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I want you to run. Don't try to save me. Don't be a hero. Just get on your horse and ride as far and fast as you can. She turned to face him. We've been through this. I'm not leaving you. Please, I can face whatever's coming if I know you're safe. I can't do this if I'm worried about you. Then I guess you'll have to worry. Her voice was firm, brooking no argument. We started this together. We finish it together. That's how this works. He wanted to argue, to make her see reason, but he also knew that stubbornness was part of why he loved her. So instead, he pulled her close and they sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, counting the hours until dawn. The first light was barely touching the eastern ridges when they hitched the horses to the wagon. The strongbox sat in the back, heavy and tempting. Ethan and Vance took the driver's bench, both armed with rifles. Sarah rode alongside on her mare, positioned as a scout. The town was silent as they rolled out, but Ethan could feel eyes watching from every window. Hannigan stood in the doorway of his store, his daughter pressed against his leg. Chen watched from his shop. Even a few of the miners who'd refused to fight came out to witness the departure. And from the Lucky Diamond, the Kane gang emerged. Silas Jr. stood on the porch, a coffee cup in hand, watching the wagon roll past. He raised the cup in salute, that flat gaze never leaving Ethan's face. "See you soon, Sheriff," he called. Ethan didn't respond, just kept the horses moving. North out of town, toward the river crossing, toward whatever was waiting. They'd gone maybe 2 miles when Sarah dropped back from her scout position. "They're following," she said quietly. "Whole gang staying about a mile back." "Good. Let them think they're hunting us." The road wound through scrub hills, following the creek valley toward its junction with the Red River. As they climbed higher, the terrain grew rougher, more broken. Perfect country for an ambush. They reached the ford around mid-morning. The Red River ran fast and loud, swollen from the recent storm, the water rust-colored from the red earth upstream. The crossing was narrow, maybe 30 feet wide, with steep banks rising on both sides covered in tumbled boulders and struggling sage. "This is it," Ethan said, pulling the wagon to a halt. "Sarah, you take the north bank. Find a position with good cover and clear sight lines. Caleb, you're on the south. I'll stay with the wagon." "What's to stop them from just shooting you from the banks?" Vance asked. "They won't risk it. They want the gold intact, and bullets around a strongbox full of gold dust could scatter it into the river. They'll want to take me alive first, make sure they can open the box safely." "That's a lot of assumptions." "Welcome to my life." Ethan helped them unload extra ammunition, canteens, everything they'd need for a sustained fight. "Remember, we're not trying to kill all 16. We're trying to break their will, make them realize the gold isn't worth dying for. Once they start retreating, we let them go." "And if they don't retreat?" Sarah asked. Ethan met her eyes. "Then we do what we have to do." She kissed him once, hard, then scrambled up the north bank with her rifle. Vance headed south. Within minutes, both had disappeared into the rocks, invisible from the road. Ethan was alone with the wagon and the gold and the sound of the river. He checked his rifle one more time, then settled in to wait. He didn't have to wait long. The first rider appeared on the southern rise about 20 minutes later, one of the gang, scouting ahead. The man surveyed the crossing, saw the wagon stopped in the middle of the ford, water rushing around its wheels, saw Ethan standing beside it, apparently checking a wheel. The scout withdrew, and minutes later, the whole gang appeared. 16 men on horseback, spreading out along the southern bank, rifles and pistols drawn. Silas Jr. rode at the front, flanked by Lucas and Clay's remaining brothers. The eldest Kane looked down at Ethan with something approaching respect. "Sheriff Rourke," he called over the river's roar. "Seems you got yourself in a predicament." "Wheels stuck," Ethan called back. "Give me a minute and I'll be on my way." "Oh, I don't think so." Silas Jr. dismounted, his men following suit. "See, we've taken an interest in your cargo. Figure it'd be easier if you just handed it over peaceable-like." "Can't do that. This gold belongs to the United States government." "Government's not here. We are." Silas Jr. started walking his horse into the ford, water rising to its chest. His men followed, spreading out, surrounding the wagon from all sides. Ethan backed up against the strongbox, making himself look cornered. "This is robbery, federal crime. Only a crime if someone's alive to report it." Silas Jr. was halfway across now, his horse fighting the current. "Last chance, Sheriff. Step away from the gold." "Or what?" Silas Jr. smiled, and it was like watching death put on a human face. "Or we find out if you're as fast as the stories say." His hand dropped to his gun, and Sarah fired. The shot cracked out from the north bank, kicking up water 2 feet in front of Silas Jr.'s horse. The animal reared, screaming. The gang spun toward the sound, guns coming up. Vance fired from the south, his bullet spanging off a rock near one of the riders. The man's horse bolted, throwing its rider into the river. "Ambush!" someone yelled. Chaos erupted. The gang opened fire on the banks, bullets whining off rocks, kicking up dirt. But Sarah and Vance were well hidden, their positions chosen for maximum cover. Return fire was wild. Panicked, Ethan used the confusion to abandon the wagon, scrambling toward the north bank. A bullet caught the water near his feet. Another tugged at his coat. Then he was behind a boulder, rifle up, breathing hard. "Pin them down!" Silas Jr. was roaring. "Don't let them retreat!" But the gang was trapped in the worst possible position, caught in the middle of a fast river, taking fire from elevated positions on both banks, their horses panicking. 2 more riders went into the water. One man took a bullet in the shoulder and fell screaming. "Fall back," Lucas yelled. "Get to the south bank." They tried to retreat, but the river was working against them now. Horses struggled against the current. Men abandoned their mounts, wading and swimming for shore. The organized army had dissolved into a mob of desperate individuals fighting for survival. Ethan fired carefully, aiming for horses, not men, trying to create more chaos without unnecessary killing. A horse went down, throwing its rider. Another bolted back the way they'd come, its rider clinging desperately to the saddle. Within 5 minutes, the gang had retreated to the south bank, leaving 3 horses dead in the water, 1 man wounded and another missing, probably swept downstream. They took cover in the rocks, returning fire, but their position was terrible. The river separated them from their objective, and crossing again would mean running the same deadly gauntlet. "This is Sheriff Rourke," Ethan called out during a lull in the firing. "You're surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and you'll be treated fairly." It was a bluff. 3 people didn't surround 16, but in the chaos, the gang might believe it. "Go to hell," someone shouted back. More gunfire. A bullet struck the rock inches from Ethan's head, showering him with stone chips. He returned fire, heard a yelp of pain. The fight settled into a stalemate. The gang couldn't advance without crossing the river again, and crossing meant death. But Ethan and his allies couldn't advance either without exposing themselves to concentrated fire. Both sides traded shots, neither willing to commit to a final push. Then Silas Jr. did something unexpected. He stood up, exposed, arms raised. "Hold fire!" he bellowed. "Hold your damn fire!" Gradually, the shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, the river seemed deafening. "Sheriff," Silas Jr. called, "you've made your point. This gold's more trouble than it's worth. We're leaving. You've got my word. We'll ride out, never come back to Redstone Gulch." Ethan wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the victory, let them go, avoid more bloodshed. But something felt wrong. The way Silas Jr. stood too calm, too confident. The way his men weren't moving to their horses, but staying in position. "Drop your weapons first," Ethan called back. "All of you. Then you can ride out." "Not happening. We leave armed, or we don't leave at all." Stalemate within a stalemate. Ethan's mind raced, trying to see the angle, trying to understand what Silas Jr. was really doing. Then he heard it. Hoofbeats from the south, coming fast. His stomach dropped. Reinforcements. Silas Jr. had split his force, left men behind to circle around. The old flanking maneuver. "Sarah!" he yelled. "South approach!" But it was too late. 4 riders burst from the southern trail, catching Vance's position from behind. The doctor tried to turn, to bring his rifle to bear, but one of the riders was on him before he could fire. They crashed together into the rocks. Sarah abandoned her position, trying to help Vance, but that exposed her to fire from the main gang. Bullets chased her across the rocks. She dove behind an outcropping, pinned down. Ethan was moving before he thought, running along the bank toward Vance's position. A bullet sang past his ear. Another kicked up dirt at his feet. He didn't care. Vance needed help. He came around a boulder and found the doctor on the ground, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, one of the riders standing over him with a gun pointed at his chest. "Drop it!" the rider yelled at Ethan. Time slowed. Ethan could feel the weight of his rifle, the distance between him and the target, the angles and trajectories. 20 years of muscle memory screamed at him to shoot first, shoot fast, shoot to kill. But that was the old way. the way he'd sworn to abandon. He dropped the rifle. "Smart," the rider said. "Now kick it over here." Ethan complied, watching the weapon slide across the dirt, out of reach, watching his last advantage disappear. The rider grinned. "Silas Jr.'s gonna love this. We got their doctor and their sheriff. Game's over." From across the river, Silas Jr. was already in motion, his men rushing the ford again, no longer afraid with the ambush broken. Within minutes, they'd be across. Within minutes, it would all be over. Ethan looked at Vance, at the blood running down the doctor's face, looked across at Sarah, still pinned down by gunfire, looked at the rider standing over him with victory in his eyes, and made his choice. He dove forward inside the rider's gun, same move he'd used on Jesse Kane what felt like a lifetime ago. His hand caught the man's wrist, twisted, the gun firing into empty air. They grappled, falling, rolling in the dirt. The rider was younger, stronger, but Ethan was desperate and skilled and fighting for more than just his life. He got a knee into the man's stomach, drove an elbow into his jaw. The rider's grip on the gun loosened. Ethan twisted it free, reversed it, brought it down hard on the man's temple. The rider went limp. Ethan grabbed his rifle, spun toward the river. Silas Jr. and his gang were halfway across, water exploding around them as Sarah fired from her new position. But there were too many of them, too much firepower converging. He needed to even the odds, needed something to shift the balance. Then he saw it, the strongbox in the abandoned wagon, still sitting in the middle of the ford. The gold. The reason everyone was here. Ethan raised his rifle and fired 3 times, fast and accurate. The strongbox lock shattered, the lid flew open, and $12,000 worth of gold dust and nuggets spilled into the Red River. The water took it immediately, scattering it downstream in a glittering cloud, washing it away to scatter across miles of riverbed where no one would ever recover it all. Every gun stopped firing. Every man in the river froze, watching their fortune disappear into the current. "No!" Silas Jr. screamed, a sound of pure anguish. "No, you son of a It's over!" Ethan yelled. "The gold's gone! There's nothing left to fight for!" For a moment, nobody moved. The gang stood in the river, watching the last of the gold vanish downstream, their dreams of wealth dissolving in red water. Some of them looked at Silas Jr., waiting for orders. Others just looked broken. Lucas was the first to move, turning his horse back toward the south bank. "I'm out," he said flatly. "This whole job's cursed. I'm done." Jesse followed him. Then Ben. One by one, the gang members turned away, abandoning Silas Jr. in the middle of the river. They'd come for easy money, not a war. With the money gone, so was their loyalty. Silas Jr. stood alone in the water, his face twisted with rage and something darker, the realization that he'd been beaten, not by greater force, but by someone willing to destroy the prize rather than let it be stolen. "This isn't over, Rourke," he called, but his voice had lost its edge. "You hear me? This isn't—" "Yeah, it is." Ethan kept his rifle trained on the man. "Ride out now, or I arrest you for robbery, murder, and every other crime you've committed. Your choice, but make it fast." For a long moment, Silas Jr. just stood there, water rushing around his legs, defeat written in every line of his body. Then he turned and waded to the south bank, climbed on his horse, and rode away without looking back. The rest of the gang followed, a disorganized retreat that quickly became a rout. Within 10 minutes, they were gone, leaving only dead horses and spent shell casings to mark the battle. Sarah scrambled down to check on Vance. The doctor was sitting up, holding a cloth to his bleeding head, but alive. She helped him to his feet, then both of them joined Ethan by the river's edge. They stood together in the sudden quiet, watching the Red River carry away the last traces of gold, listening to the hoofbeats fade into the distance. "We won," Vance said, sounding surprised. "We survived," Ethan corrected. "Not quite the same thing." "The gold," Sarah started, "was just metal. Lives are worth more." Ethan put his arm around her, feeling the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Everyone who contributed will be compensated from the town fund. Somehow." They salvaged what they could from the wagon and started the long walk back to Redstone Gulch. It was late afternoon by the time they crested the final ridge and saw the town spread out below them, still standing, still whole. People emerged as they entered the main street, cautiously at first, then in a rush as word spread that the gang was gone. Hannigan was first, asking about the gold with worry in his eyes. Ethan explained what happened, watched the merchant's face fall, then harden into acceptance. Better than being dead, Hannigan said. Better than living under the Kanes forever. Others agreed. The loss hurt, but not as much as continued tyranny would have. They'd traded gold for freedom, and most seemed to think they'd gotten the better end of the bargain. That night, Ethan sat in the sheriff's office, filling out reports by lamplight. Sarah dozed in the spare chair, exhausted. Vance had stitched his own head wound and declared himself fit for duty, though he'd agreed to rest. Ethan was writing down the day's events when he heard footsteps on the porch. His hand went to his rifle, but the figure in the doorway was familiar. Clay Kane stood there, still in his cell clothes, looking at Ethan through the bars. "They left without me," he said quietly. "I noticed." Silas Jr. rode right past town, didn't even stop to break me out. Something that might have been hurt flickered in Clay's empty eyes. "Family's supposed to stick together. Maybe they figured you made your choice when you surrendered." "Maybe." Clay was quiet for a moment. "Sheriff, I need to tell you something about the night I killed Dalton." Ethan set down his pen. "I'm listening." "It wasn't random. Lucas ordered it. Said Dalton was getting too brave, needed to be made an example of. So I shot him in the back. Just like Chen said." Clay's voice was matter-of-fact, relating events without emotion. "But before he died, Dalton said something. He looked at me and said, 'You don't have to be this.' I've been thinking about that. Thinking maybe he was right." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll testify. Against Lucas, against all of them. Tell everything I know about what they've done, where they'll run, who they'll contact. Help you build a real case." Clay met his eyes. "In exchange, I want a chance, not freedom, not forgiveness. Just a chance to be something other than what I've been." Ethan studied the man who'd killed his predecessor, trying to see past the murderer to the possibility beneath. It was a risk. Clay could be lying, could be planning something. But there was something in his voice, in the way he held himself, that suggested he was telling the truth. "All right," Ethan said. "We'll talk to the circuit judge when he comes through. See what can be worked out." "Thank you." After Clay retreated to his cot, Sarah stirred in her chair. "You believe him?" she asked sleepily. "I want to. Whether I should is another question." "You're good at seeing the best in people, even when they don't deserve it." She stood, stretching. "Come on, you need sleep. The reports can wait." She was right. Ethan locked the office, checked that Clay was secure, and they walked together through the quiet streets to the boarding house. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding trust, compensating the gold contributors, figuring out what kind of justice to seek for the Kane brothers still at large. But tonight, Redstone Gulch was free. Tonight, the people could sleep without fear. And tomorrow, Doctor, Caleb Vance would wake up with a choice to make, one that would echo through all their lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. Sleep didn't come easy that night, despite the exhaustion. Ethan lay in the dark listening to Sarah breathe beside him, his mind replaying the river crossing over and over, the guns, the water, the gold washing away. He'd won without becoming what he'd feared, but the victory tasted hollow. The Kane brothers were still out there, and men like that didn't forgive or forget. Morning came gray and cold, autumn finally asserting itself after the storm. Ethan dressed quietly and walked to the office, finding Vance already there with fresh coffee and a grim expression. "Couldn't sleep either?" Ethan asked, accepting a cup. "Kept seeing that rider standing over me with his gun, kept thinking how close we came." Vance touched the bandage on his forehead. "I'm a doctor, Ethan. I'm supposed to save lives, not nearly lose my own in gunfights. You did save lives. The whole town's, maybe. By getting lucky. Next time we might not be." Vance sat heavily. "I've been thinking about what happens now. Lucas and the others are still out there, Silas Jr. too. They're not just going to ride off into the sunset and never come back." "I know. So what's the plan?" Before Ethan could answer, the door opened and Chen stepped inside, his usual nervous demeanor replaced by something harder, more determined. "Sheriff," Chen said, "I need to tell you something about Dr. Vance." Vance went very still. Ethan looked between them, sensing something significant shifting in the room. "What about Dr. Vance?" Ethan asked carefully. Chen's eyes fixed on the doctor. 3 years ago, before I come to Redstone Gulch, I live in railroad camp. My brother worked there too, helped build track through mountains. One day accident happened. Big rock fall, crush many men. My brother, he get hurt bad. Bleeding inside, coughing blood." Vance had gone pale. "Doctor come to camp," Chen continued, his voice tight with old pain. "Young doctor traveling through. My brother's still alive. Still could be saved maybe. But doctor, he look at Chinese workers. He look at white workers hurt too. He choose to help white men first. By time he get to my brother, too late. My brother die on ground, calling for help that never come." The silence in the office was suffocating. Ethan looked at Vance, saw guilt written in every line of the doctor's face. "That doctor was you," Ethan said quietly. It wasn't a question. Vance's hands were shaking. He set down his coffee cup before it could spill. "Yes." "You let my brother die because he was Chinese," Chen said, and there was no accusation in his voice now, just flat statement of fact. "You choose who live and who die based on color of skin." Vance's voice cracked. "I was young. I was stupid. I believed things then that I can't defend what I did, Chen. I can't even explain it in a way that makes sense now. I was taught that some lives mattered more than others, and I believed it. I was wrong. My brother's name was Chen Wei. He was 23 years old. He wanted to save money, bring family from China, start restaurant." Chen's composure was breaking now, tears tracking down his weathered face. "He never get that chance because you decide his life worth less." Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He looked at Vance, this man who'd stood with him, who'd risked his life at the river, who'd shown courage when others ran. And he saw the truth. People could change, but the past didn't disappear just because you wanted it to. "Why tell me this now?" Ethan asked Chen. "Because I see Dr. Vance at River. I see him try to help, try to be brave. I see him maybe become better man." Chen wiped his eyes. "But I also see you trust him, and I think you should know who you trust, what he capable of." "Chen, I'm sorry," Vance said, his voice raw. "I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't bring your brother back, but I'm sorry. I've spent 3 years trying to make up for that day, trying to be better. That's why I came here to this nowhere town, to help people who couldn't afford fancy doctors, to treat everyone the same regardless of who they were." "You want forgiveness?" Chen asked. "No, I don't deserve forgiveness. I just want you to know that I see what I did. I see it every day, and I'm trying to be someone your brother would have wanted me to be, even though I failed to be that person when it mattered." Chen stood there for a long moment, his slight frame rigid with emotion. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped forward and extended his hand to Vance. "I cannot forgive," Chen said. "That not mine to give. Only my brother could forgive, and he is gone. But I can see you try to change. I can see you face your past. That take courage too." Vance took his hand, and they stood there in shared pain, the gulf between them not bridged but at least acknowledged. After Chen left, Vance sat with his head in his hands. "You think I'm a monster," he said. "I think you did a monstrous thing," Ethan replied carefully. "I also think you've been trying to atone for it. The question is whether trying is enough." "Is it? For you?" Ethan thought about his own past. 12 dead men, how many widows and orphans, how much pain caused by his own hands. He'd spent 3 years trying to outrun that history, trying to become someone better. Was trying enough? "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know that if we only allowed perfect people to do good, nothing good would ever get done. You saved lives at that river, Caleb. You stood when others ran. That matters. But it doesn't erase what I did. No, nothing erases the past. But we can choose what we do with it. Let it define us or let it teach us." Ethan stood. The Caleb Vance who let Chen Wei die wouldn't have stood at that river, wouldn't have risked his life for this town. That means you've changed. Whether you've changed enough is something only you can answer. Before Vance could respond, Sarah burst through the door, her face flushed from running. "Ethan, we have a problem. Lucas Kane is back." They found him in the middle of Main Street, alone, sitting on his horse with his hands visible and empty. He looked like a man who'd aged a decade overnight, hollow-eyed, unshaven, diminished. "I came to negotiate," Lucas called out when he saw Ethan approaching. "Just me, no tricks, no guns." Ethan stopped 10 feet away, rifle cradled but not aimed. Behind him, townspeople were emerging, drawn by the commotion. Sarah stood on the boardwalk, her own rifle ready. "Negotiate what?" Ethan asked. "My brother, Clay. I want to make a deal for his release. He murdered Sheriff Dalton. He's going to trial." "I know, and I'm here to confess that I ordered it." Lucas's voice was flat, exhausted. "I'll testify to that. I'll testify to everything, the robberies, the extortion, all of it. But I want you to let Clay go." Ethan studied him, trying to see the angle. "Why?" "Because he's the only family I have left who's worth a damn." Lucas's facade cracked, showing real emotion underneath. "Silas Jr. left us, just rode away after the river, took his gang, and disappeared. Jesse and Ben went with him. They didn't even look back. But Clay made a choice to stand down, to stop fighting. That takes something I don't have. So you're willing to hang for him?" "If it comes to that, yes." Lucas met his eyes. "I'm tired, Sheriff. Tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of being what I've been. Maybe it's time I answered for it." It was the opening Ethan had been hoping for, a confession, testimony that could bring down the whole gang. But something about Lucas's surrender felt wrong, too easy. "Get off your horse," Ethan said. "Slow." Lucas dismounted carefully, hands still visible. Ethan circled him, checking for hidden weapons, finding a knife in his boot, but no guns. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, robbery, and about a dozen other charges," Ethan said, producing handcuffs. "You have the right to—" "I know my rights. Just get it over with." Ethan cuffed him and led him toward the office. The crowd that had gathered watched in stunned silence as Lucas Kane, terror of Redstone Gulch, walked meekly to jail without a fight. Inside, Clay stood at his cell door, watching his brother arrive. "Lucas," he said quietly. "Clay." Lucas's voice was gentle in a way Ethan had never heard from him. "You all right?" "I'm alive." "You?" "Been better." Lucas allowed himself to be locked in the cell next to Clay's. When the door clanged shut, he sat on the cot and looked at his younger brother. "I'm sorry for all of it, for dragging you into this life, for making you into something you didn't want to be." "I made my own choices," Clay said. "Did you? Or did I make them for you?" Lucas leaned back against the wall. "I was the oldest. After Pa died, I was supposed to take care of everyone. Instead, I turned us into outlaws, got us all killed or scattered. Some leader I turned out to be." Ethan left them to their reconciliation and found Vance and Sarah waiting in the office. "You believe him?" Sarah asked. "That he's really here to confess?" "I don't know, but we've got him either way. 2 Kane brothers in custody, testimony from both of them, witnesses from the town. That's enough to build a real case." "What about the others?" Vance asked. "Silas Jr., Jesse, Ben, they're still out there." "One problem at a time. Right now, we secure what we have and wait for the circuit judge." But the problem wouldn't wait. 3 days later, as Ethan was doing his evening rounds, shots rang out from the direction of the assayer's office. He ran toward the sound, finding Peters on the ground, bleeding from his leg, and a man on horseback racing out of town with a bag that clinked with gold. Ben Kane, the twitchy one. And he wasn't alone. Jesse followed close behind, both of them shooting back at the town as they fled. Ethan raised his rifle but couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting buildings. Within seconds, they were gone, disappeared into the night with whatever gold Peters had been processing. "Damn it," Ethan muttered, kneeling beside Peters. "How bad?" "Through and through," Peters gasped. "They came in asking about assay rates, seemed normal. Then Ben pulled his gun, demanded whatever gold I had. I tried to stop them, and—" "Easy! Vance!" Ethan called. "Need you here!" The doctor came running, his medical bag already in hand. While he worked on Peters, Ethan stood and looked out into the darkness where the Kane brothers had vanished. They were getting bold again, testing the town's defenses, seeing if Ethan would chase them or stay to protect what he had. "They're baiting you," Sarah said, appearing at his shoulder. "They want you to come after them, leave the town vulnerable." "I know. So what are you going to do?" "My job. Protect this town." He turned back to help Vance move Peters inside. "But I need to do something about them eventually. Can't just let them keep hitting us whenever they want." That night, Ethan sat with Lucas in his cell, the outlaw nursing a cup of water while Ethan asked questions. "Where would they run?" Ethan asked. "Silas Jr. and your other brothers?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "There's a place. Old mining camp about 30 miles north, near the state line. Abandoned now, but good defensible position. Silas always said if things went bad, that's where we'd regroup." "You're telling me this why?" "Because I meant what I said about being tired. And because every day they're out there, they're hurting people. Maybe if you can stop them, some good comes out of this mess." Lucas looked up. "But Sheriff, you need to understand. Silas Jr. isn't like me or Clay. He's meaner, smarter, and he doesn't quit. If you go after him, you better be ready to finish it, because he won't give you a second chance." Noted. Ethan left Lucas and found Vance cleaning up from treating Peters. The doctor's hands were steady now, his focus complete. When he worked, nothing else existed. "How is he?" Ethan asked. "He'll live. The bullet missed the bone, clean through the muscle. He's lucky." "Luck seems to be in short supply lately." Vance set down his instruments. "You're thinking about going after them, aren't you? The rest of the Kanes." "Can't let them keep terrorizing the territory. Eventually they'll come back here in force, or they'll hurt enough people that I'll have blood on my hands for not stopping them when I could." "That's not your responsibility, Ethan. You're a town sheriff, not a territorial marshal. Tell that to the people they'll hurt if I don't act." Vance sighed. "Then let me come with you. You'll need backup." "No, I need you here, protecting the town. If this is a trap, if they hit Redstone Gulch while I'm gone, you're the only one with the spine to stand against them." Ethan put a hand on the doctor's shoulder. "Besides, I work better alone. Always have. That's what worries me." Sarah was waiting at the boarding house when Ethan returned. She took one look at his face and knew. "You're going after them," she said. "I have to." "No, you don't. You could wait for the territorial marshal. Let the law handle it officially." "The marshal's 6 weeks away at best. How many people get hurt in 6 weeks?" He sat beside her on the bed. "Sarah, I know what I promised. I know I said we'd leave when this was over, go back to our cabin, live in peace. But this isn't over, not while they're out there." "So when is it over, Ethan? When you've tracked down every outlaw in 3 territories? When you've made the whole world safe?" Her voice was sharp with frustration and fear. "You're falling back into it. The hunting, the violence, the belief that you're the only one who can fix things." "I'm trying to prevent violence, not cause it." "By riding into an armed camp alone, that's prevention? I won't be alone. I'll have the law on my side. The law won't stop bullets." She grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at her. "I love you. I love the man you've become, the peace you've found. But I'm watching you slip back into being the man you were, and it's terrifying. Because that man got shot and nearly died. And if I hadn't found him, he would have bled out in the woods alone." Ethan pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. "I know. And I promise you I'm not going back to that. But I can't walk away from this either. Those men will keep hurting people until someone stops them, and I'm the only one here who can." "Then at least let me come with you." "No. If something happens to me, this town needs you. Vance needs you. Promise me you'll stay here. Keep everyone safe." She pulled back, anger and love warring in her eyes. "You're asking me to just sit here and wait to hear if you're alive or dead?" "I'm asking you to trust me. One more time. Let me finish this and then we go home. No more badges, no more gunfights. Just us and the wilderness." She searched his face for a long moment, then finally nodded. "One more time. But Ethan, if you don't come back, I swear I'll hunt down the Kanes myself and make them pay." "I believe you." They held each other in the darkness, neither sleeping, both counting the hours until dawn when everything would change again. Ethan left before sunrise, telling only Vance and Sarah where he was going. He rode north on his gelding, following directions Lucas had given him toward the abandoned mining camp. The trail wound through increasingly rough country, the kind of place where civilization's reach grew weak and men made their own laws. He found the camp around noon on the second day. Lucas had been right. It was defensible, set in a box canyon with only one way in or out, the old mine buildings providing cover and sight lines. Smoke rose from one of the structures, confirming occupancy. Ethan tied his horse a mile back and approached on foot, using the skills he'd learned in 2 decades of staying alive in hostile territory. He found a position on the canyon rim overlooking the camp and settled in to watch. 3 men. He counted them through the afternoon. Jesse moving between buildings, Ben sitting on a porch cleaning guns, and Silas Jr. himself, the big man seeming to fill whatever space he occupied. No sign of the gang from the river. They'd either disbanded or been sent elsewhere. Just 3 men. Should have been easy. But nothing about the Kanes was easy. As the sun began to set, Ethan climbed down from his observation point and walked openly into camp, hands visible, rifle slung over his shoulder. He wanted them to see him coming, wanted to give them the chance to surrender before it came to violence. Silas Jr. spotted him first. The big man stood slowly, hand moving to his gun. "Sheriff Rourke," he called. "Either you're the bravest man I've ever met or the stupidest." "Probably both," Ethan replied, stopping 20 feet away. "I'm here to place you under arrest for robbery and attempted murder. You can come peacefully or not. Your choice." Jesse and Ben emerged from the building, spreading out to flank their brother. 3 guns against 1 man. The old familiar arithmetic of death. "You rode all the way out here alone to arrest us?" Jesse laughed. "That's adorable. I'm giving you a chance to do this the right way. Lucas and Clay are already in custody, already making statements. You're finished either way. But how you finish, that's up to you." Silas Jr. studied him with those flat, calculating eyes. "You really think you can take all 3 of us?" "Don't need to take you, just need to arrest you. There's a difference." "Is there?" Silas Jr.'s hand was on his gun now, fingers caressing the grip. "Because from where I'm standing, you're 1 man with a death wish, and we're 3 men who've got nothing to lose. You've got your lives to lose. Seems like something. Life ain't worth much when you're headed for a noose anyway." Silas Jr. smiled, and it was like watching a wolf bare its teeth. "But here's what I'm thinking. Maybe we can reach an understanding. You turn around, ride back to your little town, and forget you ever saw us. We'll clear out, head to Mexico, never bother Redstone Gulch again. Everyone lives, everyone wins." It was tempting. Let them go, avoid the bloodshed, achieve the same end result. But Ethan knew men like Silas Jr. They didn't honor deals. They'd lay low for a while, then resurface somewhere else, hurt new people, build new empires of fear. "Can't do that," Ethan said. "Then you're going to die here. And for what? A badge? A town full of people who'll forget you in a year? For the principle that evil doesn't get to win just because fighting it is hard." Silas Jr. laughed, a genuine sound. "Principles. That's what this is about, Sheriff. Principles don't stop bullets." "Maybe not, but they're still worth dying for." "If you say so." Silas Jr.'s smile faded. "Last chance. Right away. Last chance. Surrender." For a moment, nobody moved. The canyon was silent except for wind through the old mine timbers. Then Silas Jr.'s hand dropped to his gun. 3 things happened simultaneously. Ethan dove left behind an old ore cart, even as his rifle came off his shoulder. Jesse drew and fired, his bullet spanging off the cart's iron wheel. Ben got his gun halfway out before Ethan's first shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Silas Jr. didn't draw. Instead, he charged, covering the distance with terrifying speed. He hit the ore cart like a battering ram, tipping it over, crushing Ethan underneath the metal weight. Air exploded from Ethan's lungs. His rifle fell from nerveless fingers. Silas Jr. grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground one-handed. "Should have taken the deal, Sheriff." Ethan's vision was graying at the edges, his lungs screaming for air. He kicked out, caught Silas Jr. in the knee. The grip loosened enough for him to gasp half a breath. He drove his thumbs into the pressure points below Silas Jr.'s ears. a dirty fighting trick he'd learned from a Chinese laborer years ago. Silas Jr. roared and dropped him. Ethan hit the ground rolling, came up beside his fallen rifle. Jesse was lining up another shot. Ethan grabbed the rifle and fired from the hip, the bullet taking Jesse's hat off his head. The younger Kane dove for cover. Ben was back up, his left arm hanging useless but his right hand still working. He fired 3 times, fast and wild. One bullet grazed Ethan's ribs, burning like a brand. Another hit the ground near his feet. The third went wide. Ethan returned fire, aiming low, hitting Ben in the leg. The outlaw went down screaming. Then Silas Jr. was on him again, this time with a knife. The blade came in fast and low, aiming for Ethan's gut. Ethan twisted, the knife cutting through his coat but missing flesh. He grabbed Silas Jr.'s wrist, holding the knife away, and they grappled in the dirt, 2 men fighting for survival in the gathering dark. Ethan was faster, more skilled, but Silas Jr. was stronger, heavier, driven by rage. They rolled and fought, trading ineffective blows, the knife dancing between them like a third combatant. Jesse appeared above them, gun aimed at Ethan's head. "Let him go or I shoot!" Ethan went still, hands releasing Silas Jr. The big man rolled away, climbing to his feet, breathing hard. "Told you," Silas Jr. said, wiping blood from his mouth. "Should have taken the deal." Jesse cocked his pistol. Ethan closed his eyes, thinking of Sarah, of the life they'd built, of all the things he'd never get to say. The shot cracked out across the canyon. Jesse staggered, a red flower blooming on his chest. He looked down at it in confusion, then fell. Ethan's eyes snapped open. On the canyon rim, backlit by the dying sun, stood Sarah with her rifle. "I told you I'd come if you needed me," she called down. Silas Jr. spun toward her, raising his own gun. But Sarah was already moving, scrambling down the canyon wall with the surety of someone raised in these mountains. She fired again, the bullet kicking up dirt near Silas Jr.'s feet, forcing him to dive for cover. Ethan grabbed his rifle and rolled to a defensive position. Ben was crawling toward a building, leaving a blood trail. Jesse wasn't moving, and Silas Jr. had vanished into the shadows of the old mine. "You all right?" Sarah called, reaching the canyon floor. "I am now." Ethan checked his ribs, bleeding but not serious. "Jesse?" She looked at the fallen outlaw, her face pale. "Is he—" "Yeah." Her hands tightened on her rifle. She'd never killed anyone before. Ethan could see it hitting her, the weight of it, the irrevocability. "Sarah, listen to me. You saved my life. You did what you had to do." "I know, I just—" She swallowed hard. "I understand now. What you carry. What you've been trying to escape." Before he could respond, Silas Jr.'s voice echoed from the mine entrance. "You killed my brother, you bitch! I'm gonna make you pay for that!" Gunfire erupted from the darkness, bullets whining off rocks. Ethan pulled Sarah behind the ore cart, returning fire into the mine mouth. But Silas Jr. had the advantage now. He was in cover, in darkness, and rage was making him reckless and dangerous. "We need to end this," Sarah said. "He'll pick us off if we stay here." "I know." Ethan's mind was racing. The mine was a death trap, narrow tunnels, unstable supports, dozens of places for an ambush. But staying out here meant a siege they couldn't win, unless they changed the game entirely. "Can you keep him pinned down?" Ethan asked. "Keep shooting into that mine entrance, make him stay deep?" "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid. Give me 5 minutes, then stop firing." He moved before she could argue, circling wide around the camp toward where the old mine offices stood. He'd spotted something during his earlier observation, old crates marked with warnings about blasting powder. If any of it was still good, if it hadn't degraded too much in the years since the mine closed. He found the crates in a storage shed, ancient dynamite sticks packed in sawdust, so old they were weeping nitroglycerin. Extremely unstable, extremely dangerous, perfect. He carefully extracted 6 sticks, handling them like they were made of spun glass. Even the smallest jar could set them off. He crimped blasting caps to each one, ran fuse line, worked with hands that remembered this skill from his younger days when he'd used explosives to breach buildings or destroy bridges. 5 minutes. Sarah's gunfire was steady, methodical, keeping Silas Jr. pinned. Ethan made his way back around to the mine entrance, staying low, staying quiet. He placed the dynamite at strategic points around the entrance, not to collapse it entirely, but to bring down enough rock to seal it, trap Silas Jr. inside. He was setting the last charge when Sarah's rifle went silent. In the sudden quiet, he heard Silas Jr. moving in the mine, probably repositioning, probably about to make a rush. Ethan lit the fuses and ran. "Down!" he yelled to Sarah. "Get down and cover your ears!" The explosion was massive, a rolling boom that shook the ground and sent a column of dust and rock fragments skyward. The mine entrance collapsed in on itself, tons of stone sealing it as effectively as any prison. When the dust settled, Ethan and Sarah approached carefully. The entrance was blocked completely, no way in or out. From somewhere deep inside, they could hear Silas Jr. screaming, his voice muffled by layers of rock. "He's trapped," Sarah said, "but alive. He'll run out of air eventually, or he'll find another way out. Either way, he's finished." Ethan looked at her. "You shouldn't have come." "Yes, I should have. You'd be dead if I hadn't." She was right, and they both knew it. He pulled her close, ignoring the pain in his ribs, just holding her while the adrenaline drained away. They tended to Ben first. The wounded outlaw was still breathing, still conscious. Sarah bound his wounds with strips torn from his own shirt, while Ethan kept watch. Jesse they covered with a blanket, leaving him for the territorial authorities to collect. By the time they rode back to Redstone Gulch 3 days later, Ethan had made a decision. He found Vance at the doctor's office and placed his badge on the desk. "I'm done," he said simply. Vance looked at the badge, then at Ethan. "What happened out there?" "Jesse Kane is dead. Ben's wounded but alive, ready to stand trial. Silas Jr. is trapped in a collapsed mine, either dead or soon will be." Ethan's voice was flat, exhausted. "I accomplished what I set out to do, but I also realized something. Sarah killed a man to save me. I nearly died doing this. And for what? So I could be sheriff of a town I never intended to stay in." "You made this town safe, Ethan. That matters." "It does, but it's cost too much. Cost me too much." He pushed the badge across the desk. "I came here trying to prove I could bring justice without violence. Instead, I brought more violence, just aimed differently. That's not peace. That's just war with better intentions." Vance picked up the badge, turning it over in his hands. "So what now?" "Now I go home. Back to my cabin, my woman, my simple life. Let someone else clean up the rest. And Lucas and Clay, they're waiting for trial, expecting you to see it through. They'll get their trial, but it doesn't need to be me there for it." Ethan stood. "You want to be the one who sees this through? Pin on that badge. This town trusts you, respects you. You'd make a good sheriff." "Me?" Vance looked stunned. "Ethan, I can't. You stood at that river when others ran. You've been facing your past with more courage than most men ever manage. You've earned the chance to be more than what you were." Ethan headed for the door, then paused. "Besides, someone needs to make sure Clay gets that second chance he's asking for. Someone who understands what it means to carry the weight of lives you didn't save." He left Vance staring at the badge, wrestling with a decision that would define the rest of his life. Sarah was waiting with their packed horses. They rode out of Redstone Gulch the same way they'd ridden in weeks ago. Two people looking for supplies and a quiet life. Except now they carried the weight of everything that had happened, all the choices made, all the consequences faced. "Regrets?" Sarah asked as the town disappeared behind them. Ethan thought about it. About the people he'd helped, the violence he'd prevented, the peace he'd managed to keep without becoming the killer he'd feared returning to. "Some," he admitted, "but not about the parts that mattered." They rode higher into the mountains, leaving civilization and its complications behind. The cabin would be waiting, unchanged, patient. The wilderness would welcome them back without judgment or expectation. Behind them, in Redstone Gulch, Dr. Caleb Vance sat alone in the sheriff's office, staring at a tin badge and thinking about redemption, about second chances, about whether a man who'd let someone die could become a man who protected life. After a long moment, he pinned the badge to his chest and walked out to face the town that would now be his responsibility. And in a jail cell, Clay Kane watched the new sheriff pass and allowed himself something he hadn't felt in years, hope that maybe, just maybe, Being something other than what you were was actually possible. The cabin stood exactly as they'd left it, weathered but solid, surrounded by pines that whispered secrets in the mountain wind. Ethan dismounted and just stood there for a moment, letting the wilderness settle back into his bones. No gunfire, no desperate townspeople, no badges or outlaws or moral calculations, just silence and Sarah and the life they'd built. "Home," Sarah said, coming to stand beside him. "Home," he agreed. They unpacked slowly, neither rushing, both savoring the mundane tasks that marked a return to normalcy. Sarah started a fire in the stove while Ethan tended the horses, brushing them down, checking their hooves, performing the rituals of care that grounded him. When he finally came inside, the cabin was warm and smelled like coffee and wood smoke. "How long do you think we have?" Sarah asked, pouring him a cup. "Before the world finds us again?" "Maybe forever. Maybe a week. Does it matter?" "I suppose not." She sat across from him at their small table. "Ethan, I killed a man. Jesse Kane. I pulled the trigger and watched him fall, and I haven't really let myself feel that yet." He reached across and took her hand. "Tell me what you're feeling now." "Guilty, relieved, terrified that it was so easy. I saw you in danger and I didn't hesitate, didn't think about the consequences. I just acted. And now he's dead, and I'm the one who did it. You saved my life." "I know, and I'd do it again. That's what scares me." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I understand now why you ran from this life. Because once you cross that line, once you know you're capable of killing another human being, you can't unknow it. It changes everything." Ethan stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she finally let herself cry. He knew this territory intimately, the guilt, the justifications, the midnight hours spent wondering if there had been another way. He'd walked this path alone for years before finding her. The least he could do was walk it with her now. "It does change you," he said quietly, "but it doesn't have to define you. You're not a killer, Sarah. You're a woman who made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. That's different." "Is it? How is it different from what you did all those years?" "Because you did it to save a life, not take one. The act was the same, but the intention matters. And because you're here, feeling this, questioning it, a real killer doesn't question. They justify. They move on. They become what they do." He pulled back to look at her. "You're already more than what you did that day." She wiped her eyes. "How long did it take you to stop seeing their faces?" "I'll let you know when it happens." They spent the rest of the day working around the cabin, chopping wood, mending the roof where winter wind had torn shingles loose, checking their food stores. Physical labor, honest and clean, that demanded their bodies but left their minds free to process, to heal. Night fell clear and cold, stars emerging like chips of ice against black velvet. They sat on the porch, bundled in blankets, sharing the silence that had first drawn them together years ago. "Do you think Vance will do it?" Sarah asked eventually. "Take the badge, become sheriff?" "I think he has to, for himself more than for the town." "And Clay Kane? You really believe he can change?" Ethan thought about that. "I believe people can choose to be different than what they've been. Whether that counts as real change or just choosing to pretend better, I don't know. But the effort matters." "You sound like you're talking about yourself." "Maybe I am." They went to bed in their own cabin for the first time in weeks, and Ethan slept without dreams of gunfights or rivers or gold washing away into red water. When he woke, the sun was already well up. Sarah was making breakfast, and for a perfect moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The moment lasted 3 days. On the fourth morning, Ethan was splitting wood when he heard hoofbeats on the trail. His hand went automatically to where his gun would have been, found empty air, reminded himself he'd left that life behind. He set down the axe and waited. Dr. Caleb Vance rode into the clearing looking exhausted and determined, the sheriff's badge pinned to his chest. "Ethan," he said, dismounting, "I need your help." "I'm retired, Caleb." "I know, but this can't wait." Vance accepted the water Sarah brought him, drinking deep before continuing. 2 days ago, Lucas Kane escaped from jail. He's got Clay with him, and they're headed for Mexico. Ethan felt his stomach drop. "How did they get out?" "Someone helped them. We found the cell door unlocked, the night deputy unconscious. No sign of who did it, but whoever it was knew what they were doing. Vance's jaw was tight with frustration. I've been tracking them, but I'm no tracker. I keep losing the trail. They've got a 2-day head start, and if they make it across the border, they're gone forever. So let them go. Lucas confessed to ordering Dalton's murder. That's documented. Clay confessed too. They've already given you everything you need to close the case. It's not about the case. It's about justice. Vance leaned forward. Margaret Dalton deserves to see her husband's killers stand trial. The town deserves to see that the law actually means something, that you can't just murder a sheriff and walk away. And honestly, I need to prove to myself that I can do this job, that I can see something through instead of running away when it gets hard. Sarah had emerged from the cabin and was standing on the porch, her expression unreadable. What makes you think I can help? Ethan asked. I'm not a lawman anymore. No, but you're the best tracker in 3 territories. You can find them when I can't. Vance looked between them. I know I'm asking a lot. I know you came up here to get away from all this. But Ethan, you started this by taking that badge. You gave Redstone Gulch hope that justice was possible. If Lucas and Clay escape, all of that means nothing. The Kanes win, and every outlaw in the territory learns that if you're patient enough, the law gives up. That's not my problem anymore. Isn't it? Vance's voice was quiet but firm. You told me that principles are worth dying for. You showed this whole territory that one man with courage can change things. But courage isn't just standing in the street facing down guns. Sometimes it's finishing what you started even when you'd rather walk away. Ethan looked at Sarah, saw her watching him with those eyes that saw everything. It's your choice, she said, but Caleb's right. You did start this. I also finished it. I caught the Kanes, stopped their gang, saved the town. You caught some of them, but the ones who matter most, the ones who actually pulled the trigger on Sheriff Dalton, they're running free. Sarah came down from the porch. I'm not saying you owe the town anything. I'm saying you might owe it to yourself to see this through. Otherwise, it's going to sit in your gut forever. One more thing you could have done but didn't. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight settling back onto his shoulders. He'd thought he was done, thought he could just walk away and let others handle the consequences. But Sarah was right. They were both right. Lucas and Clay running free would haunt him, would turn the whole Redstone Gulch episode into an unfinished story. How far ahead are they? He asked, opening his eyes. Relief flooded Vance's face. 2 days, maybe less if they're moving slow. Direction? Southwest, toward the border. I lost their trail near Devil's Canyon. Ethan knew the area. Rough country, lots of places to hide, lots of ways to lose a pursuer. They'll be moving at night, hiding during the day. Lucas is smart enough to know we'll track them. We? Sarah said. I'll help Vance track them, get him close enough to make the arrest. Then I'm done. For real this time. And I'm coming with you, Sarah added, her tone brooking no argument. Sarah, don't. I'm not staying here wondering if you're alive or dead. We do this together or not at all. Ethan started to argue, saw the set of her jaw, and recognized a battle he couldn't win. Fine. But when we catch up to them, you stay back. This is Vance's arrest to make. They packed quickly, food, ammunition, blankets for cold nights. Ethan strapped on his gun belt for the first time in weeks, the weight of it foreign and familiar all at once. He caught Sarah watching him do it, saw the concern in her eyes. Just in case, he said. That's how it always starts. They rode out within the hour, following Vance's back trail toward where he'd lost the Kanes. The doctor was a competent enough rider, but his tracking was basic, following obvious signs and missing the subtle ones. Ethan found their trail within an hour of reaching Devil's Canyon, disturbed earth where horses had passed, a broken branch at horse height, boot prints in soft ground near a water source. They're not being careful, Ethan observed, crouching beside a clear hoofprint. Either they think they're not being followed, or they're in a hurry. Or it's a trap, Sarah said from her horse. Ethan stood, scanning the canyon walls. Always possible, but Lucas doesn't know I'm tracking him. He thinks it's just Vance, and he probably figures he can outrun a town doctor. They followed the trail southwest, moving faster now that Ethan had the scent. The Kanes had passed this way 36 hours ago, maybe less. They were maintaining a good pace, but not desperate, confident. That night they camped in a sheltered ravine, no fire, cold food, taking turns on watch. Ethan took the first shift, sitting with his rifle across his knees, watching stars wheel overhead. Vance joined him around midnight, unable to sleep. "Can I ask you something?" the doctor said quietly. "Go ahead." "When you killed those 12 men in Montana, did it change you, or were you always capable of it and Montana just brought it out?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Both, I think. I was always capable of violence. Most men are, given the right circumstances. But Montana changed me because it showed me what I could become if I let the violence become the only thing that mattered. After that, every time I pulled a gun, it got easier. Until one day I realized I didn't feel anything anymore when I killed. That's when I knew I had to stop." "How did you stop? Just decide one day and walk away?" "More or less. Got shot by a man faster than me, survived it barely, and while I was recovering, I had time to think about what I'd become. Sarah found me, helped me remember there were other ways to be. But Caleb, stopping the killing doesn't stop you from being capable of it. That capability is always there waiting. You just have to choose every day not to use it." Vance absorbed this. "I'm trying to choose differently. With Chen's brother, I can't undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to be the doctor I should have been that day. Is that enough?" "You'll have to answer that for yourself. But I think the fact that you're trying, that you're willing to face what you did and work to be better, that counts for something. Even if people still die because of choices I made, even then, we don't get to escape consequences, Caleb. We just get to decide what we do with them." They sat in silence after that, two men carrying the weight of their pasts, trying to build something better from the wreckage. The next day they pushed hard, following the trail across increasingly barren country. The Kanes were heading for the border town of San Marcos, Ethan guessed, a lawless place where men could disappear into Mexico with no questions asked. They had maybe 24 hours to catch them before they crossed over and vanished forever. Around noon, they found evidence of a camp, fire ring, disturbed ground, horse droppings still relatively fresh. Lucas and Clay had stopped here, probably thinking they were safe enough to rest properly. "We're close," Ethan said, examining the site. "Maybe 8 hours behind now." "Can we catch them before the border?" Vance asked. "If we push through the night, maybe. But the horses are already tired." "Then we push through. I'm not losing them now." They rode hard as the day faded into evening, following the trail by moonlight when it rose, Ethan leading them with the sure instinct of a man who'd tracked fugitives across half the West. Around midnight they spotted a distant campfire, just a pinprick of light in the vast darkness. "That's them," Ethan said, pulling up. "Has to be. Nobody else would be stupid enough to light a fire this close to the border with a posse on their trail." "Unless it's a trap," Sarah said again. "Could be, but we don't have much choice. By morning they'll be in Mexico." Ethan looked at Vance. "This is your call. You're wearing the badge." Vance stared at the distant fire, his face pale in the moonlight. "We go in, quiet as we can. Try to take them without shooting if possible." They dismounted and approached on foot, leaving the horses tied to a lonely mesquite tree. The fire grew larger as they crept closer, and soon they could see two figures sitting beside it, passing a bottle back and forth. Lucas and Clay, relaxed and off guard, thinking they'd escaped. Ethan positioned Sarah behind cover with a clear sight line, put Vance on the opposite side to create a crossfire, then walked into the firelight with his rifle leveled. "Evening, boys. Thought I'd find you down Mexico way by now." Lucas jumped up, hand going to his gun, then freezing when he saw the rifle aimed at his chest. Clay remained sitting, his face resigned. "Rourke," Lucas said, genuine surprise in his voice. "I thought you retired." "I did. But apparently I'm bad at it." Ethan gestured with the rifle. "Both of you, hands where I can see them, nice and slow." Lucas complied, but his eyes were calculating, searching for an angle. "How'd you find us? Vance couldn't track a bleeding bull through fresh snow." "I taught him a few things." Ethan moved closer, keeping the rifle steady. "Clay, unbuckle your gun belt. Let it drop." Clay did as instructed, the belt falling with a soft thump. Lucas hesitated. Lucas, don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ethan said quietly. It's over. You had your run. Now it's time to face what you've done. Face what I've done? Lucas laughed bitterly. I already confessed, remember? Gave you everything you needed. What more do you want? For you to stand trial, for Margaret Dalton to see justice done for her husband. Justice. Lucas spat the word. There's no justice in this world, Rourke. Just winners and losers. You should know that better than anyone. Maybe. But I'm trying to believe something better is possible. Vance emerged from the darkness then, his own rifle raised, the badge on his chest catching the firelight. Lucas Kane, Clay Kane, you're under arrest for the murder of Sheriff James Dalton and numerous other crimes. You'll be transported back to Redstone Gulch to stand trial. Lucas looked at Vance, then back at Ethan, then started laughing, a genuine, almost delighted sound. This is beautiful. The killer playing lawman and the coward wearing a badge, you two deserve each other. He looked at Clay. What do you think, brother? Should we go quietly? Clay met Lucas's eyes, and something passed between them, some unspoken communication born of years together. I think, Clay said slowly, that I'm tired of running, tired of being what we've been. I'll go back, face trial, take whatever punishment comes. The hell you will. Lucas's voice turned hard. We're family. Family doesn't give up. Family also doesn't abandon each other in collapsing minds, Clay replied, his voice quiet but firm. Silas Jr. left us, Lucas. Left us both to save himself. And you would have done the same if the situations were reversed. I see that now. That's not true. It is, because that's what you taught us. Survival at any cost. Well, I'm done surviving. I want to live, really live. And I can't do that running from town to town, hurting people, becoming worse than what Pa was. Clay stood slowly, hands still visible. I'm going back with them, Lucas. You can come too, or you can run to Mexico alone. Your choice. Lucas looked at his brother with something approaching betrayal. I broke us out. I risked everything to free you, to give us both a chance. I know, and I appreciate it, but I didn't ask you to. I made my peace with facing consequences. Clay turned to Vance. Sheriff, I'll testify to everything, every crime, every victim, everything Lucas ordered, and everything I carried out. No deals, no conditions. I just want it to be over. Vance lowered his rifle slightly, surprise evident on his face. That's a good start, Clay. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just make sure the trial is fair. Lucas was staring at Clay like he was looking at a stranger. You're really doing this. After everything we've been through, you're choosing them over me. I'm choosing to stop being what we've been. There's a difference. For a moment, Lucas just stood there, emotions warring across his face. Rage, betrayal, grief, loss. Then his hand dropped to his gun. Lucas, don't, Ethan warned, his rifle snapping back to center mass. But Lucas wasn't drawing on Ethan. His gun came out slow, deliberate, and he placed it carefully on the ground at his feet. I'm not going to shoot you, Rourke, any of you. He straightened, hands raised. But I'm also not going back to hang. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to walk away from this fire, get on my horse, and ride for Mexico. You can shoot me in the back if you want. Wouldn't be the first time a Kane died that way. Or you can let me go and take Clay back for your trial. That's not how this works, Vance said, but his voice lacked conviction. That's exactly how this works. Because you can't take both of us back alone, not safely. One of us will make trouble, try to escape, maybe hurt someone. But if you let me go, Clay will go peacefully, testify to everything, give you the closure this town needs. Lucas looked at Ethan. And you know I'm right. You know that letting me walk away is the smart play. Ethan did know it. Tactically, Lucas was correct. Trying to transport 2 hostile prisoners across rough country with a small group was asking for disaster. But letting a confessed murderer walk free went against everything the badge was supposed to stand for. What do you think? Vance asked Ethan quietly. I think it's your decision. You're the sheriff. Vance looked at Lucas, at Clay, at the situation he'd found himself in. Ethan could see him wrestling with it, trying to find the right answer in a situation that had no right answers. If I let you go, Vance said slowly, you need to understand something. This isn't mercy. This isn't justice. This is pragmatism. And if you ever come back to this territory, if you ever hurt anyone else, I'll hunt you down myself, no matter how long it takes. Lucas smiled slightly. I believe you would, Doctor, but you won't have to. I'm done with this life, too. Just in a different way than Clay. He looked at his brother one last time. Be better than we were, Clay. Be someone Pa would have been proud of. Pa was a bastard who beat us and drank himself to death, Clay said quietly. I'm going to be someone better than that. Someone worth being proud of. Lucas nodded, accepting that, then walked backward toward the horses, moving slowly, keeping his hands visible. Nobody shot him. Nobody tried to stop him. He mounted up, looked back at the camp one final time, then rode south toward the border and whatever life waited beyond it. They watched him go until the darkness swallowed him completely. Did we just make a terrible mistake? Vance asked. Probably, Ethan admitted. But it was the right terrible mistake to make. They made camp there, posting watches, Clay sitting quietly by the fire with his hands tied loosely in front of him. He didn't try to escape, didn't make trouble, just sat and stared into the flames like a man watching his old life burn away. The ride back to Redstone Gulch took 3 days. Clay was a model prisoner, doing exactly what he was told, never complaining. On the second night, sitting by the fire while the others slept, he spoke to Ethan. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. How did you do it? Walk away from the killing, build a new life. Ethan thought about his answer. I got lucky. Sarah found me when I needed finding, gave me a reason to be better. But mostly, I just decided that the man I'd been wasn't who I wanted to die as. Every day after that was about choosing to be different, even when being different was harder. And it worked? You really changed? I'm still changing. I think that's the point. You never arrive at being a better person. You just keep working at it. Ethan looked at Clay in the firelight. But you have to mean it. Can't just be because you got caught or because staying the same is too hard. Has to be because you genuinely want to be someone else. I do. I'm just not sure I know how to be anyone except what I've been. Then figure it out in jail. Learn from Vance. He's trying to do the same thing. Maybe you can help each other. Clay nodded slowly, absorbing this. They reached Redstone Gulch late on the 3rd day. Word of their return spread quickly, and by the time they rode down Main Street, half the town had gathered to watch. Margaret Dalton stood on the boardwalk outside the general store, her face a mixture of hope and grief. Chen was there too, watching Vance with something that might have been respect. Vance dismounted and helped Clay down, walking him toward the jail with quiet dignity. At the door, he turned to address the crowd. Clay Kane is back in custody and will stand trial for the murder of Sheriff James Dalton. Justice will be served legally and properly. I promise you that. Scattered applause, some cheers. The town was cautiously optimistic, wanting to believe. Ethan and Sarah watched from their horses, not part of the celebration. This was Vance's moment, his vindication. They'd just been the help. Margaret approached them before they could leave, her eyes wet but her voice steady. Thank you, both of you, for bringing him back, for seeing this through. Thank Vance, Sarah said. He's the one who wouldn't let it go. I will, but I wanted you to know James would have been grateful. He believed in justice, believed the law could make things better. You proved him right. After she left, Ethan and Sarah rode slowly out of town, leaving Vance to his duties, leaving Redstone Gulch to its future. The sun was setting as they climbed back into the high country, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Think we're really done this time? Sarah asked. I hope so. I'm getting too old for this. You're not old. Old enough to know better, young enough to keep making the same mistakes. He looked at her, this woman who'd saved his life in more ways than one. Thank you for coming after me when I needed you, for killing Jesse Kane even though it cost you, for standing with me through all of this. We're partners. That's what partners do. They rode in comfortable silence until the cabin appeared through the trees, welcoming them home once more. This time, Ethan thought, it would stick. This time there would be no sheriffs riding up the trail with one more crisis, one more call to action. He'd done his duty, settled his debts. The wilderness could have him back. 3 months passed in blessed quiet. Winter came to the high country with its usual fury, burying the world in white silence. Ethan and Sarah settled into the rhythms of survival, keeping the fire going, tending the horses, hunting when the weather allowed. It was hard work, but honest, clean. They heard news occasionally from passing trappers. Kane had stood trial, confessed to everything, been sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. Lucas had disappeared into Mexico and hadn't been seen since. Silas Jr.'s body had been found in the collapsed mine, suffocated trying to dig his way out. Ben had healed and also stood trial, got 10 years. Jesse was buried in a pauper's grave outside Henderson Creek. The Kane brothers were finished as a force in the territory. Redstone Gulch was thriving under Sheriff Vance's leadership, growing from a frightened mining camp into something resembling a real town. Justice, it seemed, had actually prevailed. One afternoon in early spring, as the snow was beginning to melt and the first brave flowers were pushing through frozen ground, Ethan sat on the porch, whittling while Sarah repaired a torn shirt. The piece was so complete it felt almost fragile, like it might shatter if they acknowledged it too directly. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, not looking up from her sewing. About what we do when the money runs out. We can't live off savings forever. I could trap, sell furs, or we could raise horses, sell them to the army. Or you could write about what happened in Redstone Gulch, tell the story. She set down her sewing to look at him. People need to hear that kind of story, about standing up to evil, about choosing justice over revenge, about being better than what the world expects. Ethan laughed. "I'm no writer. You don't have to be good at it. You just have to tell the truth." "And what truth is that?" "That change is possible. That violence doesn't have to be met with more violence. That a man can choose to be different than what he was." She smiled. "That even in the darkest places, even when evil seems to be winning, there are people willing to stand against it." He considered this, turning it over in his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was value in recording what had happened, not as some heroic legend, but as a true account of flawed people trying to do better in a hard world. "I'll think about it," he said. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. They both tensed, old instincts kicking in, but it was just a single rider, a young man in clean clothes carrying official-looking saddlebags. "Mr. Rourke, Miss Sarah," he called as he dismounted. "That's us," Ethan replied cautiously. "I'm Deputy Miller from Redstone Gulch. Sheriff Vance asked me to deliver this." He pulled an envelope from his bags and handed it over. Ethan opened it, read the contents, then read them again to make sure he understood correctly. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "It's a deed. To the old Dalton place on the edge of town. Vance says Margaret sold it to fund her new life in Henderson Creek, and the town council voted to give it to us, as payment for services rendered." He looked up at the deputy. "We didn't do this for payment." "I know, sir. But the town wanted you to know you'd always have a place there if you wanted it. Sheriff Vance says to tell you the offer stands whenever you're ready." After the deputy left, Ethan and Sarah sat with the deed between them, staring at this unexpected gift. "We don't have to take it," Sarah said. "We can tear this up, stay here forever." But maybe having roots somewhere, being part of a community, maybe that's not the worst thing. We could keep this cabin for summers, spend winters in town where it's warmer, easier. She looked at him. "You could write your story. I could help Vance build a real medical practice. We could be part of something instead of hiding from everything." Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. For years, he'd believed that peace meant isolation, that safety required distance from other people. But Redstone Gulch had taught him something different, that community could be its own kind of strength, that being known could be a gift rather than a curse. "Let's wait until fall," he said finally. "Spend the summer up here like always. Then in autumn, when the snow starts coming, we'll go down to town. See if we fit. If we don't, we come back up here and forget the whole thing. And if we do fit, then maybe we found something better than hiding." The summer was glorious, the kind that made you understand why people fought so hard to survive the winters. They hiked and hunted and loved each other under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Ethan did start writing, scratching out the story of Redstone Gulch in a leather journal Sarah had given him. It was rough and honest, and nothing like the dime novels that glamorized frontier violence. But it was true, and that mattered. As autumn painted the aspens gold and the first frost silvered the meadows, they packed their essentials and rode down to Redstone Gulch. The town had grown in the months they'd been away. New buildings, new families, an actual church going up on the north end. Civilization creeping in, taming the wild. The Dalton place was small but solid, a 2-room cabin with a real stone fireplace and glass windows. Someone had cleaned it thoroughly, left firewood stacked and basic supplies in the cupboards. A note on the table read simply, "Welcome home, Caleb." They settled in slowly, learning the rhythms of town life. Vance came by most evenings, sharing news and conversation. The town had elected a proper council, established regular mail service, even started talking about a school. The silver was playing out, but the community had grown beyond just mining. People were putting down real roots. Margaret Dalton visited once, passing through on her way to San Francisco. She looked lighter somehow, no longer carrying the weight of grief and fear. "I wanted to thank you again," she told Ethan and Sarah over tea, "and to tell you that James would have been proud of what you did. Not the violence, he hated that, but the way you proved that courage and justice could exist without becoming the things they opposed." "I'm not sure we proved that," Ethan said. "People still died. Violence still happened. But less than it could have, and with purpose, not just revenge." She smiled. "That's all we can hope for, I think. Not perfection, just better." Chen also became a regular visitor, bringing small gifts of food and eventually asking Ethan to help him write letters to family back in China. They sat together in the evenings, the old merchant describing his memories while Ethan translated them into careful English for Sarah to transcribe. "You remind me of my brother," Chen said one night. "Not in how you look, but in heart. He believed people could be better than what life made them. He believed in hope, even when hope seems foolish." "What happened to him?" Ethan asked gently. "He died because men with power think his life not worth saving. But he dies still believing, still hoping." Chen looked at Ethan with those eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "Now you make his hope real. You show me that good man can choose to help, not hurt. That enough." Winter came hard that year, locking the town in snow and ice for weeks at a time. But the cabin was warm, and they had neighbors who checked on them, friends who shared firewood and stories. Ethan finished his account of the Redstone Gulch affair and sent it to a publisher in San Francisco on a whim, not expecting anything. The publisher surprised him by accepting it, paying him enough to live on for a year. The book came out the following spring under the title Justice Without Guns, a true account of law and conscience in the frontier. It sold modestly but steadily, reaching people who were tired of glorified violence and wanted to believe in something better. Letters arrived from readers, some skeptical, some grateful, all engaged. One letter in particular stood out, postmarked from Mexico City. "Dear Rourke," it read in Lucas Kane's distinctive hand, "read your book. You made me sound less terrible than I was, which I appreciate. I'm working in a hospital here, believe it or not. Cleaning floors, moving pays, nothing important, but it's honest work, and I'm trying to be honest these days. Tell Clay I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to change with him, and tell Vance he was right. Running to Mexico didn't make me free. Just made me a different kind of prisoner. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to come back and face what I did, but not yet. LK." Ethan never answered the letter, but he kept it, a reminder that redemption took many forms and followed no set timeline. Years passed. The town grew. Vance married a widow from Henderson Creek, and they built a proper hospital. Chen's family came from China and opened a restaurant that became the social heart of the town. More children arrived, requiring that school they'd talked about. Ethan taught history there sometimes, telling students about the frontier not as a romantic adventure, but as a hard place where people made difficult choices and lived with the consequences. Clay Kane was released after serving 10 years, his sentence reduced for good behavior and cooperation. He came back to Redstone Gulch uncertain of his welcome, but Vance gave him a job at the hospital, and Chen hired him to help build an addition to the restaurant. Slowly, carefully, he rebuilt a life from the wreckage of his past. One evening, 5 years after Ethan and Sarah had settled in town, Clay approached them at the restaurant where they were having dinner. "Mr. Rourke, Miss Sarah," he said, hat in his hands, I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to be something different. I know I don't deserve forgiveness for what I did, but I'm grateful you let me try to earn it." "You don't need to thank us," Sarah said gently. "You did the work yourself." "Maybe, but you showed me it was possible. That counted for something." Clay hesitated, then pulled a small carved wooden box from his coat. "I made this. It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside was a simple wooden star, perfectly carved, polished smooth, a sheriff's badge rendered in wood. "To remember," Clay said, "not the violence or the fear, but what you proved was possible. Justice without guns, law with conscience." After he left, Ethan held the wooden star, feeling its weight, its meaning. Sarah leaned against his shoulder. "Are you glad we stayed?" she asked. "Yeah, I am." "No regrets about the quiet life in the cabin?" "We still have summers up there, best of both worlds." He set the star on the table between them. "Besides, this is quiet. Just a different kind of quiet, the kind with people in it." "And that's enough for you? The legendary Ethan Rourke settling down to teach children and eat Chinese food?" He smiled. "It's more than enough. It's everything I didn't know I wanted." They walked home through streets that were finally, truly safe, past houses where families lived without fear, through a town that had learned to stand for itself. The badge in Ethan's pocket felt light now, its weight distributed across an entire community rather than resting on one man's shoulders. Above them, stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But here, in this small corner of the frontier, in this town built on the ruins of fear, something had changed. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. Enough to matter, enough to build on, enough to call victory. Ethan Rourke had walked into Redstone Gulch as a man running from violence, and he'd left as a man who'd mastered it, not through superior force, but through superior choice. And in doing so, he'd shown an entire territory that there was another way forward, a path between cowardice and bloodshed. The wilderness still called sometimes, promising the simple peace of isolation. But the town called louder now, with voices of friends and neighbors, with laughter of children who would grow up never knowing the Kane brothers' reign of terror, with the daily small victories of a community that had chosen justice over fear. And that, Ethan thought as he and Sarah reached their cabin, as he hung his hat and pulled her close in the lamplight, as they settled into the life they'd built together, that was worth everything. The guns stayed in their cabinet, cleaned and oiled but unused. The badge sat in a drawer, a reminder of what had been necessary once but wasn't anymore. And Ethan Rourke, former killer, temporary sheriff, reluctant hero, lived out his days as simply Ethan, husband, teacher, friend, citizen. He'd come to the frontier looking for somewhere to hide from what he'd been. Instead, he'd found somewhere to become what he'd always wanted to be. And in the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered.